Good evening, everyone. This is the Board of Directors meeting for May 26th. It's now 6 o'clock exactly. Appreciate you all for joining us. And we are now open for owners' comments. Just if you would raise your hand or let us know you have a comment. We need your name, address, and we have a three-minute limit for each one. And David, are you going to be my timekeeper?
I'll be the timekeeper.
I appreciate that just because it's easier while I'm listening. Thank you very much. So do we have any owners' comments?
Joseph Linehan.
Hey, Joseph Linehan, can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Sure. How are you all doing tonight?
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Good. Joseph Linehan, 1258 Celebration Avenue. I am asking the board to consider a point of order for action item number 2 tonight, the motion to approve a pre-construction services bid for pickleball and adult lawn sports. In reviewing the requests associated with the motion, it calls out the Pickleball Sports Court Task Force / Committee. It states that, quote, the task force is requesting a new motion for the group to pursue a pre-construction bid, and that the task force is asking for new directive from the board to pursue the costs of a pre-construction bid. The request and subsequent motion implies that the task force has been granted authority to solicit bids for CROA-owned property. According to the current president's explanation during the April 19th, 2021 workshop, the CROA board has the responsibility to approve all committees for CROA based on the charter and resolution. That resolution, which is referred to as Administrative Resolution 18 for Committee Task Force Charter, was examined, amended, and passed by this board on April 28th, 2021. The resolution specifically states in Section A that point 2, the objective and roles of a committee and task force are defined by the board. Point 4, a task force typically has a stated period of time that they will exist. Point 5, the objectives for each appointed task force shall become an exhibit to the resolution. And number 6, the objectives for each appointed task force shall be an attachment to the minutes to the board meeting where the task force is authorized or established. In Section B, it also states in point 2, a committee task force has no authority to act on behalf of CROA or any other board unless expressly granted by the board in writing. And Section E, all committee task force members are appointed by the board. I would simply ask, please, that the CROA board recognize and establish the Pickleball Sports Court Task Force according to the set and established procedures before granting or implying any official duties or authorization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Patrick, do you see any other hands up?
No other hands raised.
Okay, last call for comments before we start our meeting.
And a reminder that no comments happen during the meeting.
Yes, this is a formal meeting procedure, so not like our workshop where we will just be going straight through the agenda and not taking comments. So I will say one more time, last call for comments. Okay, Patrick? Nothing, no other hands?
Nothing.
Okay. All right. Can I verify that the meeting was properly noticed? Thank you. And verify a quorum. We have 6 members sitting at the table. So we have a quorum and we need to, so I'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, I'll say that's so much better in person than trying to do that with all of us on Zoom. I will call this meeting to order. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. The next on the agenda is to approve the minutes for the CROA. We have the CROA meeting on 4/28, the CROA workshops on 4/2, 4/9, 4/16, and 4/19.
And I'll make a motion to approve them and again remind the audience that we review them in advance of this meeting and make comments.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Committee reports. Do we have any committee chair people that would like to make a report to the board? Nope. Anything from finance, technology, or the RFP task force? We will be talking about a lot of those in the future items on this agenda, so. Okay, no committee reports then for this meeting. Liaison reports, anything? I will give an update on Island Village. The supplement was signed and passed forward, and I think it was also signed by TCC. So we are officially done with our paperwork, our paperwork part of the Island Village supplement that adds them to our homeowners association. David, you have
So there were two supplements under consideration. This is the one having to do with townhomes and service area, et cetera.
Yes, it is.
Thank
The next supplement will be part of the amenities, which will be dealt with at a future time when it's closer to being built.
Closer to the amenity.
And the way we wrote it, the way it was written with them is that Island Village would have one
One.
service area for all the townhomes when it is done, so that we don't have two smaller units and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we ended up negotiating pretty strictly with them, and it took a while to get it done, but it is now done. So, and it's, like I said, I have signed it and it has been passed on.
I have three things for CCD.
CCD,
I went to the CCD meeting last night. First item, their contract with Infomark expires in February of 2022. They are, Chairman Pilak is actually, and Gary Moyer is negotiating with Infomark for the next month to see if they can reach terms on going forward, or they may do an RFP too. So just so you know, Infomark is one of our finalists, and it wouldn't stun me if they tried to dovetail the two together, but I will wait to see the proposal. But I wanted everybody to be aware that is out there. Downtown, there are the celebration signs. They have investigated fixing those up. And they fixed up like the wood, and TCC likes the wood, but there's been discussion about it being electronic.
which signs are you referring to?
Like right there at the lake,
There's,
That one, Kevin, you've been.
Yeah,
So that's
I've
what
been the one that's hard on these
He's
ones.
been
One is owned by the
slack holder.
CBD and one is owned by us, I believe, so.
yeah, and there's one of them that Lexington really uses for advertising, there's the one that the CDD owns. They would,
I think the white one's owned by the CBD or us.
The CDD one that you've been talking about.
It's the green one,
Owned by
which has
CDD.
and that's the green one,
Which
that's the
Lexington
one there
used
by
to
us.
That's who they're talking
So
about.
what they're talking about there is they fixed up the wooden part of it, but
The structure.
how do you do it? And they've investigated it being electronic. So the discussion that happened with me on the meeting last night was, would we do the electronic update? I said I didn't think that would necessarily be an issue, because we do the Friday flash. So, you know, it would be like event type stuff, so someone could see it and say there's a concert going on down, there's this type of stuff. So it would really just be a computer type thing, online type thing. I told them we would not pay for anything to do with the sign. A resident did complain that updated on the computer basis could cost $20,000, $25,000, $30,000. And I said, that's your expense, not ours. If you, obviously I can't commit for the board, and I said that, but you know, if they chose to make it electronic, on both sides, for example, we could, I thought, easily update it from here with events that flow out Friday Flash and stuff like that. Ultimately, they decided to not make that decision until they do budgeting, which they do over the summer as regards their 2022 year. But if they choose to go down that path, they're gonna come back to us and ask us, will we be the ones who
So
update?
we would run the software part of it
Yes.
and update the
Did,
software.
did anybody think to run this past the celebration company?
Celebration Company has already reviewed it all. Celebration.
Yeah,
They're okay with
Absolutely.
digital?
I'm
And
sorry.
the celebration company is absolutely amenable. They wanted the wooden sign, which has been fixed. They don't like electronics, but they will allow electronics as long as it does not have advertising, meaning like the bigger real estate company can't advertise and stuff like that. So if it's going to be there, then it needs to be a community-oriented sign that talks about, you know, Founder's Day is coming up and there's going to be a concert at Lakeside and stuff like that.
I'm surprised, I'm kind of surprised by that.
But that was specifically discussed
We
last.
couldn't get one here.
Well, no, that was
County
just-
Church couldn't get
I
one.
thought it was in the documents.
That was specifically discussed last night, and the documents have been reviewed. Jan was going to do another review that TCC did agree that they would sign off on. So that, it was,
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I don't know if CCC has any jurisdiction over the CDD any longer. I think they only influence them. They
Right,
can't force them the
so-
way they can force us.
no advertising, but it would be items of community interest. So that if you're a visitor from out of town, and you're going through it, you look at the sign, maybe you touch a sign and see, here are where the different restaurants are, here are the villages, and it's easy to follow.
I love it, and it's been something that I think back when Steve was here, he discussed having something like that put in here at Town Hall and throughout the community.
That was, you said that was turned down, I wasn't part of
And
that.
that's always been an issue, so I would, just for consistency, though TCC, I don't believe they may give a blessing, I don't think they actually have any authority any longer. It might be worth seeing for consistency purposes throughout the community, if a CROA parcel or a CROA parcel, or anything wanted to have a similar or same item,
Or
would it be approved?
set the software up so that the same thing would be, show up a couple different
But
places.
would it be approved is my question, because TCC can turn around and say, yeah, CDD, do what you want, but across the street from there, let's say a restaurant or something, I don't know if that would be approved.
Yeah, I think, I'm
That's
not
one.
gonna answer the question legally. I'm just
Yeah.
briefing y'all on what.
I would love to see an update. I would love to see, I mean, it needs it. Everybody knows that I've been going off about that for years. And it's about time. I know that Lexington did maintain it, then they didn't put flyers in there any longer, so they didn't want to deal with it. I'm just a little concerned that there's no reserve or budget set up by the CBD in place for that. You know, that they have to delay it even further. I'm kind of surprised.
That's why it would become a budget item for the new budget.
Every budget this summer, you said this summer,
So
right?
you have, well, it probably falls, it's
You have-
October 1 budget.
The two signs, is that the one across from where the Antonio's was?
Yeah,
What
that's
is
the
the other
green,
one?
the green
On
sign.
this
There's a white one. First one, like Dagger and Tavern. There's a
Okay,
white
so
one
they're
that
both
has the
there.
map.
Yeah.
We
has the
take
map
care
of
of that.
Okay, so that's out.
That's ours. As far as I understand, that is a small parcel, it's like a postage stamp that is CROA's. The other one is a postage stamp that is CDD, and that's a green one that's metal. So that's not right.
Okay.
Okay.
Last thing I had was, Jackson and I have met with Jack McLaughlin a couple of times. Jack wanted to get something written up on events. Jack is working to it. He's talked with the people out at Jeter Band. He has talked with Lexington and different things like that. We've been running with it. I think coming up with something pretty decent. We said we were preoccupied with everything, so said, God bless you, Jack, run with it. So he's been running with it, using this work that had been done in the past. So I think something decent is coming forward and ultimately will make its way to the board.
Great, that's, I was wondering about that, because I hadn't heard any updates.
Not,
That's
that's
great.
the update.
That's great, because Halloween is not that far away, and
Right.
then will be fully up and running.
And
Jackson,
Jack has even went to the point of looking at street flows down by Jeter, banding, because we closed parking hall and that. Utilize the parking side for a period of time and stuff like that. So Jack has done real work.
very good, thank you. I think Jack's on the call, so I'll say thank you, and looking forward to seeing that. Jackson, thank you for joining. Jackson has now joined the meeting, so. Okay, so we've had, I'm sorry, yeah, he said, no, you're fine.
Could I ask one question, and I apologize for not being here at the start. Could we talk about the condo council at some point? I don't know if that's a liaison or if I have to reserve that for board member comments.
Why don't we do that during board comments? Because we, right now, we're gonna move on to the financial review.
Right.
And Cindy, are you doing our financial review today?
Sort of.
Sort of what it is? All right.
If you were listening earlier to our previous meeting, with Brian's help, I've been trying to get my arms around the new software that's being used for our reporting. The format is completely different. So well, right now I'm in the process of trying to sift through everything and see what goes where, if that makes any sense. I am not a CPA, Brian is, and he's having as much difficulty as I am. So, it's just a learning curve, everybody's going through it. So, I don't know if I should just leave it there, or Brian, do you want to add something?
Let me jump in. So we have March financials. We don't have April. I mean, it's June 1. So with the conversion to VMS, we kind of went to where we literally ended up yesterday is we were sitting down and kind of comparing the old budget and the new budget. We've had account numbers that changed. The things have been broken out differently. we're trying to build a grid. We're trying to understand what changed. So I'm not arguing that CCMC did something bad. I'm arguing we've had a conversion and there may not have been there was not a roadmap. So what we're doing now is we're trying to pick up pieces and figure out the roadmap. I know Neil's been looking at it too, as a liaison, and we're just doing that. I suspect everything will be fine at the end of the day. And if we had nothing else to do, but there's a lot going on right now. And once we get, we're gonna in a lot of ways rely on Neil where he's comfortable. We're gonna continue to look at that type of stuff, but we need management to come back and tell us they're comfortable with the financials. That is the right thing versus us auditing, because we have no way to get answers to questions. We will give our questions in the open. I feel that is the appropriate way to do it.
Okay.
Neil, is that a fair statement?
That's more than fair because my time that I've spent with Brian since I've joined Celebration, I've learned more about just accounting in general. So I have my own questions. I know Cindy and Brian, you're gonna have yours. So that's what I was saying before. I want the questions coming from us to shared services so that it's us talking as one, not me sending something based on my interpretation and then sending a follow-up question from either Brian. I want shared services to understand that we as a team have these questions. Because I have found that, not here, but I've just seen in other places where if a manager is asking versus a board member, sometimes the answer is different. So I'd rather all of us be asking it, and that way there's no question on exactly what we expect and what we need in return.
I guess, so my overall comment would be that we don't have a concern at this point and we're moving forward. And as soon as we have finalized numbers, we can ask appropriate questions.
Sure.
Sure. We're moving
We
forward.
had a system before that worked like a book. It may have been an old, dirty book, but Brian knew how to do it because Brian had been doing it for 3 or 4 years. We've got a brand new system. We've got some new GL account numbers. We've got a lot of change. My guess is somebody's gonna have to beat the daylights out of it for 6 to 8 weeks to figure out exactly what's gonna happen. And we've got a lot of other things going on.
Well,
So
and
that's just the honest answer.
Yeah, and I will add, unlike the former software that that we were using, where you really couldn't specialize it or modify it, it's called VMS is the software. We can tell them that we want specialized reports and they can build them for us. So
And that can
again,
help.
yeah, so that's the big part of why I want this to be a collective, treasurer, Brian, myself, so that we can ask the questions, and once we get the answers, then we can ask for modified reports to meet our needs, not us try to reverse engineer into the new report GLs. And you saw what I saw on the first set, and there's like 100 new GLs that weren't budgeted. And again, I believe that is just the two softwares just struggling to migrate.
We literally, Cindy and I have not discussed this, but where we literally may end up doing actual reports where we lay out January, February, March, April actual, and we may find out that we're gonna do aggregate budgeting, and then we're gonna have to just look at things in aggregate for this year, because that's life.
Okay.
Now, before, are you have anything else?
No.
I have one other item. I had sent a CJC balance sheet to the board. And this is something that Neil and I have been talking about for a while, and I know Neil's had conversations with Paige and them. I do want the board to be aware that, we have a large receivable at CROA from CJC.
This has been going on for quite some
This
time.
has been going on for, Neil's research done a lot of work. I think it's probably been going on for a decade or more. But, CROA has a payable. Obviously, if we have a receivable, 75% of it would circuit, but I think probably CROA owes us $40,000 or so. And I'd like to get the thing researched, resolved. We shouldn't just have it hang forever. So I'm bringing it up here to the board because it's time now to get it here so that we almost have this like a standing monthly touch base item so that we can get this resolved.
So I actually do have the final audit from our new CFO. Well, she's been with us for that decade plus. As soon as I can see that the new financials reflect that audit that they did, then I'll be comfortable sending it. But my concern was they did the audit based on the old numbers. And now that we have the new software with new GLs and new everything, it should reconcile easily if they did the audit right.
Okay, and that's fair, and that'd be a great answer.
So
So,
hopefully
all I'm
next
doing
month,
is
and then hopefully next month's board meeting, it'll be
Yes,
back
I'm
on.
putting a placeholder out that I'd like to have under the financial part as a sub-agenda item going forward until we resolve it, pro con or indifferent.
Just for clarification, we don't know what that accumulated from.
No.
Do we?
No, but that is what they have went back.
A long time.
But
It's really good.
I mean, Neil, that's the reason they were doing the audit, because they kind of had people in Arizona, they had Steve Waring, I think it goes back before Steve Waring, but it's just rolled forward, it's one of those items that as you keep fleshing things out more and more, you say, there needs to be a better answer.
And it gets audited is it every year?
Yes.
And it's always been fine. So when that time comes for whoever we use.
Well, I'm
that's
gonna
gonna be
bring it to their
a point to bring
attention
up.
too, because I mean, so in perfect fairness, if we wanted a perfect audit, we could pay $100,000, we pay $10,000. So we all know that we're getting a materially correct audit. And, you know, CROA has the ability to do assessments and stuff like that. So we just need to get cash straightened out. That's my answer to the group. If you don't have a
More to
problem.
come.
I'm not sure I totally understand that, but I know you do, and we'll continue to work forward on that.
Cindy and I are all over it.
You're all over it, so we'll see an update on the next board, the next board packet. All right, the next is item G, which is our management report. And Neil, you're doing that tonight?
Yeah,
All yours.
circulated a couple days ago. I know that's not always enough time for our directors to review it. So we can either go with questions from the board, or for the benefit of our homeowners in attendance virtually, I can read it. It's totally your call.
I was gonna say, why don't you, go ahead, Jeff.
I do have questions.
Okay,
I appreciate this. Let me preface what I'm gonna ask about tonight by saying that this is not a gotcha. This is a recognition that management puts significant hours into preparing this part of the report. A lot of hours, I think, and a lot of expertise goes into it. And the purpose of the management report, as with the whole board book, it seems to me, is to help us as directors do our job. It's to help us understand the operations of a very complex community with a lot of moving parts. What I think for me, being away for a year and coming back, I was struck with how much of the reports are repeated month to month, how much are templated, and how little information is really gleaned without a super deep dive in. And so what I'd like to do tonight, with the board's permission, is as we go through some of these reports, and I've made these comments in the Dropbox, I know some of you have seen them, I think Kevin has seen them for sure. I want to point out some areas where I am not challenging the numbers or necessarily even the methodology. I'm simply trying to get this report so it makes sense to us as volunteers who don't spend all day, hopefully, reading reports and trying to dig through them. Is that fair? Is it?
I think if you have questions along the way, certainly ask them.
Okay.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
So my first question is on page 102 of your report book. This has to do, for the people that are watching, this has to do in the management report with homeowners' calls, and it's titled Business Office, so if everybody sees it. And you'll notice that the second one down says homeowner calls and responses. We raised a question about this last month because the number was roughly 5,000 calls. And Susanna researched it, and I appreciate that very much, Susanna, and came up with the obvious answer that that number wasn't accurate. It included missed calls, return calls, multiple calls, and so on. So this month, you'll notice that we've gone from 2,100 calls down to 1,800. And I asked the question, why the drop? And Susanna's response, which I think is perfectly reasonable, is it was just a quieter month. Okay. But here's the real issue for me. How do we count calls? We don't have a consistent methodology to do it. That is it somebody making a check mark at the front desk? Is it software that tells us this call counts and this call doesn't count? I mean, I could come up with a bunch of different scenarios.
You wanna let them respond as to how?
Well, let me, one more second, then I will. So I spoke to Gary Hutzman, knower of all things detail. And Gary said, I would love to help work with management to create a methodology that would be in writing that would say, this is how you count certain KPIs. I thought that was a very generous offer on his part. So now, that's my comment.
So how are calls counted?
Okay, so
Hey,
it is
Susanna.
done through
Sorry.
the software.
Real quick, and just because, and again, I think I've said this, but I don't want to assume. When I arrived and Susanna took her position, we restructured at least a little bit. So with respect to business office KPIs, if it's human resources related, it's Neil. And for the most part, the rest of it is under Susanna, but really ultimately, all things operations in terms of business administration is Susanna, all things financial, HR, lifestyle is Neil. And I'm not saying that, I mean, we all should be aware, but I just want to know in the future when we're directing questions about certain departments, we get email overload. I don't want anybody thinking we're trying to ignore you. It's just sometimes we have to then circle it back. So we're still fine tuning it, but I'm deferring to Susanna because she and I believe Kaylee have been doing most of the research with respect to the KPIs and the phone calls.
Yes.
Okay.
And so also Patrick, of course, has helped with this. So we get the numbers from a software system, and it is a big, as you said, data dump. And so trying to sort through manually to come up with a number is challenging. And so we have talked to the company to say, well, how can we get to the numbers that are really right on point? And the answer was, you upgrade your system, and then we can give you more detailed reports, basically. So is that number going to be exactly correct? I think it's a good estimation. I don't know if it's exactly the right number. I think if the board wants to tell us what they want to know, and if we go and talk to the system and find out how to obtain that and if it costs more money, then we'll come back to you. If you're good with the way we do it now, then that's fine. So I think it starts with what would you like to know in this KPI?
So did you throw out a ballpark, like, so what are you talking if we upgrade, you know? I mean, do they have levels of, you know?
I think Patrick talked to him. I don't think they gave you any prices, am I right?
No, just
And
waiting
we were
on,
more just trying to figure out, okay, why can't we get to, it's like a lot of data. How, we spent, I don't know how long Katie's spending on it to try to figure out, but it's a bit, so how do we get to the right number? And it was, well, you're gonna have to do an upgrade. So then the next step would be to find out, okay, well, what kind of upgrade and how much would that cost? Because our phone system is how old? 5 years? 10 years?
just over 5 years.
Just over 5 years.
So the point of
I'm
the
sorry,
KPI, 5 years.
5 years.
Well, just over 5 years old. So the point of the KPI is to get initial phone calls. The initial phone call from a resident, not the follow-up phone call, not the, the second time the resident calls about the same issue, and I don't know how you would determine that.
So are you
Question.
asking or
Yeah,
telling
I'm
me?
questioning,
So-
I'm kind of questioning how you're counting them, because you said you're doing it manually, right?
Well, we're
So-
going through the report manually, but the KPI says how many phone calls answered. And so with going through the report, it was the number reflected either a person answered or voicemail or a transfer. But that's still pretty broad, I'm sure, to your point, Jackson. So do you want, how specific do you want it? And if so, we need to go look into how do we get that specific number?
Kevin had a question.
I want to say a respected question. I think knowledge is power and it's huge. We learned that in the RFP process for all of us to go ahead and have questions and answer sessions for different possibilities. I think management has a lot going on right now, and while this would be a huge benefit, it's a little too late for us to have it. I do think this would be a great question or something to review for whoever, whether CCMC or another opportunity comes up, of how they do it, what system they work with, and things like that. Because the reality is it's going to take 6 months to get something like this started. I think I look at all these figures as a guide. And of course, Jackson, you found things that, were very high or very low, but I respect you pointing those out. I just don't want to get into the weeds of day-to-day on this.
I think you're correct. That's part of the reason I mentioned Gary Hudspeth, and there might be others who could help with this. I recognize it's a big task. I think I take some degree of ownership in the KPIs that we developed with UCF a couple of years ago. And it's frustrating to me to come back and see that they are not really helping me do my job as a director, because I really don't know what the numbers mean. I don't know, just listening to Susanna right now. Are we counting a missed call and a return call? Are we counting a call that goes to the front desk, goes to the answering service, then goes to somebody else as 2 calls? I don't know, and I'm not sure anybody else does either.
And I don't know that it's even consistent how they're counting it month to month, so.
Well, for the last couple months, for sure, it has been, because we've re-looked at it and found a new way to do it. But I do think that, to your point, the information is vague. It is a lot of information they give you. They give you missed calls, they give you, someone hung up, they give you the call that came in and transferred to somebody else. So, do you know what I mean? If you're looking for specific, how many calls did we get this month? Or how many calls out of those were answered? I think we'd have to go to a new level of reaching out to the
And
company.
it may well be that all of this has to happen after a contract is written, but I want it out and understood so that this board understands that we're operating at some disadvantage with numbers. There are just some things we really don't know. And while these reports come out, I don't think they help us.
David.
If they're,
Go ahead.
go ahead, David.
Okay, David has his hand up.
So your question is a good one. I think Kevin's point is a good one. But I think the place now is to start our thinking to your question, Susanna, is what is it that the board wants to know and what will help us moving forward? Taking Gary's expertise, I've done a lot of this. I mean, with that particular question and Susanna's response, I generate like 10 different scenarios that would be potential helpful items for us to decide if that's the way we want to go. So I think a place at this point with this, and I'm looking at some of these, it's like, no, that doesn't quite get at what we intended. It meets the scope of it, but it's not really what the spirit of what we wanted. And I don't mean that in any disrespect to this, because this is, as UCF said, like a first of its kind type of thing for a homeowners association. So this is very exciting. So I'd be willing to sit with Gary and whomever else to start flushing some of this out, not taking board time, but then floating it to the board to say, hey, here's like 20 options, but we only need 3.
I think you bring up a good point. I think the KPIs in and of themselves are a great thing, but I don't know that we are using them to the advantage because they need either a further definition or edited or modified to fit a current situation. And now you have, most of the people that were originally on this when it was rolled out have changed positions and are either interpreting it differently or don't know how to interpret it to get the information that we really wanted to get at.
So maybe there's a parallel process
Yeah.
as long as we're doing some other things this summer to be covered in item number 10 tonight.
I was gonna say, yeah, we've got some other things that are on the
But
agenda.
maybe there's a parallel process that a few of us could get geeky about.
For what it's,
Brian,
sorry. go
I don't know how you
Brian
take the
was
notes,
first
I'm
on
gonna take
that.
the minutes on geeky.
Right?
All I was gonna say is you don't need me to support what you're saying. I have actually had to start, and I don't know if you've looked at it, but especially with the personnel, I've actually had to start doing averages because I found with the KPIs when I adopted them, it was way too easy for me to manipulate. So if I had somebody resign on the 16th of the month, I could just say that they were there for the full month, so I've actually done a modification, some averages, especially with the HR stuff, because that's a more representative figure. So I support us diving deeper to define these better. So
Well,
again, not,
Jackson, I think, were you the only one that was on board when the KPIs were?
No.
You two.
Nobody's got one.
Everyone said, okay,
Yeah,
I wasn't.
four of us.
Okay, so you all were here, so you
Back
guys
in
are
the
the
old
experts in
days.
it.
They all voted
So
for
you
it.
guys were all on board at the time
Started
they were
underneath.
developed, so. And you had a comment, Brian.
Okay, so 2 comments. I would hate to see us waste time on this right now. The points are very valid. I think what matters most is that we do it, however we're doing it, we do it consistent month to month, so we can look at trends.
Yeah.
I would love to see us dump the year-to-date column. I think the year-to-date column is broken in most places, not meaningful in other places. So what I'd like to see is just get rid of year-to-date and then next month we get May, because then you'll be able to look at 6 months, you'll be able to say, is the trend good or is the trend bad? We can always have the risk of manipulation of numbers to create a good or bad trend, that's life. But at least we can kind of look at it and say, what does it lead to?
Okay.
Is it fair to drop the year date, everybody agree?
I think for most of them, I think the number of hires and terminations for year to date, nice to just see if they're even as opposed to going through the columns to add up, but I think most of it is common sense where it's applicable.
And if there's a couple where it's valuable, I'm happy having it there, but most of them,
Most of them
year
don't.
to date is.
With a footnote that just says what Neil just said, I averaged them. I mean, the footnotes can be very helpful for us.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to spend a lot of board time on this. My goal here is simply to point out that we need to have data that management isn't burdened by creating,
Right.
that doesn't, have any of you actually read these and done anything with them? And the answer is probably not. We've read them, but we can't do anything with them. So why are we pretending that there's something happening when it's not?
So is the action item to remove the year-to-date column or just use it as we see fit? What was that?
You know, I think we didn't really take a vote on it. I think the general consensus.
I believe year to date.
I mean, I don't know
It's
if
okay.
it's really gonna.
But then only use it for the items where it could possibly have relevance.
Like an average or percentage.
So I'll give you an exact example. So if we're looking at page 102, recruit and development or discipline all employees, number of full-time employees, you'll now notice underneath that in parentheses says average, because if that is way too easy for me just to put year to date and add them all up, because that looks great. The truth is, through December through April, my average number of full-time employees is 23, but really it should be 28. I feel like that's a more representative
And
report
that
to
is
you.
that is a useful number.
And at the end of the year, ideally, that average should creep towards 26, 27, 28, not back down to 19, 20, et cetera. So that's why I did that, because that made more sense to me to measure.
I think.
Yeah, and I don't think we have to tell you year to date in or out. I think you can make that decision. You're the ones working with the numbers and the tables.
Right.
Use your good judgment. I trust the judgment of management to do this stuff. I just,
While we're here, can I ask, do you want the December of last year in there? Is that
No.
relevant for you?
It's a-
Okay,
how could it be?
thanks. Well.
There you
I'm
go.
trying to make it meaningful.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
It's just,
I have done a million of these things and they create a ton of work for you. I would add. No, they do. So I think
I
that year to
agree.
date should only
We
be there
agree.
where it's relevant information, so you're not blowing your brains out. There's enough other things to manage.
So thank you, Jackson, for bringing this to our attention, that it is something that we need to review, but tonight's probably not the time to get a deep dive into this. Cindy, you had a comment before we move on?
Yeah, well, yeah, Joe Jackson says, how thoroughly do we look at this? Is this something that maybe we only want to see quarterly? I mean, each month listed there, but not necessarily a part of the packet every single month.
I think that's a question that we need to answer when we do a deep dive into this, because I would agree that some of that isn't relevant on a monthly basis. But I don't know who can answer that tonight. Good question though, good thought.
Task force.
Oh, that's an interesting word. Okay, all right, anything else? That's it for management report. Any other comments?
I do have one,
Okay,
unless of course there's further questions.
Brian had one after you, but go ahead.
I did, and I'm not going to apologize to JR. I did want to point out that we have exceeded 53,000 year to date for fundraising in previous years that JR was able to measure. The previous year high had been $5,000. So JR and his team have increased sponsorship and fundraising efforts this year by in excess of 1,000%. So I want to say that in a board meeting and make sure he feels a little uncomfortable with it.
But that's fabulous. Thank you. That's very good. Thank you.
I do have other questions, detailed questions, sorry. But there are things that in the management report that are detailed now that I'd like to get to.
Brian
Go
was
ahead.
next.
Go ahead with Jackson's and then I'll get to my answer.
Okay.
If you go to page 112, which is called approved projects list. If you look at Park View roof replacement, you'll see that it says an estimated completion date of June 2021, and then comments, it says obtaining permits. That's not correct.
No.
They're well beyond that.
Yeah.
And this part of the list is a good example of where things are not being updated and kept current to show us where they really are. And that to me is problematic. That if something is really complete, it should be complete. If it's not, then we should say that. If you'll notice, there's a re-roofing of 314 Charleston. We've talked about that. There's a question as to whether that's complete or not. So I'm not sure that this report as it stands is accurate, and I'd like it to be reviewed.
But if they spend all their time on KPIs, then they don't have time to get one like this. We've got to decide what is important in here.
If it's not important to us, and to your point, if it's not important to us, then don't put it in the board book.
While you're on this page, can I also bring up an item, because this was my next item?
Go ahead.
On page 112, the item, entrance design remodel for the 851 building.
Yeah.
That was put on hold by the board in 2018 because we thought maybe we were going to use this as a community center.
Right.
That should be off of hold right now, and we should be dealing with it. Does the board agree?
That's the, to make the
That was the
handicap
entrance for the
accessible.
design, we had had it designed, we had TCC sign off, if I remember right, and it was $7,000 or some number like that, I'm
I
going to
think we
remember.
had actually said it was coming off of some of the previous meeting.
Well, I think so, but it's
It's
on
still
hold
saying on
here
hold, yeah.
from 2018, I want to move it off hold.
Right, was that the one that actually helps create the front of 851 to be ADA compliant as well?
Yes, I
Okay,
believe
thank
it
you.
is, yes.
So whatever we gotta do to, and
Or
if the
move it to
board
a
needs,
workshop.
if we need to bring it up at a workshop or a next board meeting, do anything, but let's move it off the hold.
Can you add that to a workshop agenda, please?
Yes, I will.
Sorry, Jackson, if you bring an item up, I'll just.
No, this is what I mean.
On that same page, I'm gonna jump in as well. It may just be easier to just change to have in progress, not started, on hold, complete.
Correct,
Boom, 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 boom.
correct.
It's
Okay.
less work for everybody. If you have questions about something, you can ask.
Right, and I'm gonna recommend that same kind of structure for a number of these reports where they're not time dated, they're not aging reports.
Mhm.
So we're seeing things from 2017, 2018. If we go to the condominiums, we go back to the day the condominium was built. I don't think we need all that.
No,
You're just throwing stuff in there. This is a how many page board packet?
This is a skinny one,
This is
Jackson.
skinny.
Yeah.
231.
But it doesn't need to be this long, I don't think. Unless you're just dying to do this stuff.
Oh, not at all. You know, I think that having been here through so many boards, I can say that the needs of the boards have changed over the years. The
Yeah.
pendulum swings one way and then it goes the other way.
We're all about
So,
efficiency.
yeah.
Well, and I've done some, because we were talking about the voluminous board packets. And I've done some work of just reformatting some of these reports, like like this one here. Is one. What is that?
Service area
These
report.
monthly board reports here,
Thank you.
where we
You
get
can
broad
read them.
service areas.
I work on this package, I know exactly what that
Oh, I thought you could read it from there.
is. No, I just know exactly what it looks
You
like.
know the layout.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. I'm very impressed.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Alright, oh, back over to this,
That
sorry.
was impressive.
I've been working, I've worked on this one, I've worked on these. These are the CROA landscape maintenance inspection ones. To condense them a little bit, but still give us the information that we need by category. I've noticed that there's one of these that has it's the one where you go around the pools and you check everything, does this work, does this work, does this work? does this work?
Facilities checklist.
I've, redone that one, so it gets all on one page and you still have all the information there.
Send them on
I've
over,
noticed,
Cindy.
I've noticed that, the one where it's the checklist, okay?
Yeah.
And you flip it over on the back and it's got all these boxes with a number of things in each box that are the points for each inspection. Okay, so the last box is like numbers 1 through 18, and they're supposed to correlate to the number of the item on the front sheet. They're not even being used correctly. They're, it was a problem on number 18 on the front, but the problem is notated as number 1 on the back.
Gotcha.
So I mean,
Okay.
which will condense it, so I will,
If you could share those, I think that will definitely help them.
I think it'll make it easier.
Give them a kind of an idea.
And I would add to
Sounds
that,
good.
that the same criteria should be applied to the reports that say things like operations and maintenance, which is page 169, page 170, page 171, page 172, page 173. All of those items say things like TBD. Or complete, maybe not complete, maybe in process. It is very difficult to figure out what our priorities are what we're spending time and energy on and where management is spending time. And if to comments that just say something's open or scheduling, maybe that's all that we can say about them, but I suspect we can get a better sense of where we are and what the priorities are. If you look at the service areas, you've got all sorts of projects going on here, some of which are huge, multiple six-figure projects, some of which are very small. And there's no priority, there's no sense of what's most important, when it's being done, what's happening. There's completed items and items that apparently aren't planned for another year. It's very difficult, again, to know what to do with this report.
That report was set up a couple of years ago so that we would have communication with the service areas. Because before that, there wasn't exactly, so that, and that is exactly what it was done for.
I think he's referring to the work plan, though, aren't you?
I'm talking about the work plans on
Yeah.
page 169.
171.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, and some of those are, long completed items that maybe need to just be archived.
Yeah, and you could go through any of these operations, maintenance, service areas, they've all got the same. I think Kevin makes a really good point about how to organize them. But again, the goal here should be that the board members and the public should be able to see these and say, oh, those are the priorities, that's what they're working on, that's where we are on things. I would defy anybody, I don't know who's on the call tonight, but I would defy anybody that's out there watching this to figure out where our priorities are from this. We just don't know.
Well, I'm gonna piggyback on you for just a moment with this. So just looking at monthly facility inspection checklist, and this is not, this is a real life example. So I go ahead and management is aware, I shared something with them about the East Village area, palm trees that are dead, cut down, pool lights broken, things like that, and it's been this way for years. And this is something that these
What page are you
reports, on this one specifically, 119. On these reports, I can go ahead and I can look at this page and I can say, okay, based on this, instead of walking the property, things look pretty good. There's a light that's out, but everything else looks great. And there's zero comment about that real concern that's been going on for many years. And so those are the types of things that we
The
need to
check
put in
sheets need to
here.
be meaningfully
Correct.
completed.
Are we
It's
just wasting
actually-
management's time doing these things? I mean,
If they're not done properly,
Honestly,
it's
I
waste
think
of
now
time.
we are.
and that, I don't want to waste their time, I don't want to waste Brian's time because he's giving me the look.
He
But
is.
Yeah, it comes to a point where it's information overload.
I agree.
No, I don't mean to give anybody a look, I would rather we've had the conversation, at some point we need to make a decision. Because Susanna is the poor person who gets caught having to do this, and it takes a week of her life. And then you can't complain, nothing else gets done.
Right.
So,
And this is, and what she is giving us, honestly, are you guys actually getting any benefit out of all these numbers?
Checking the Georgia and the Bermuda and the St. Augustine.
That was created in time, the landscape report was created for the review of the landscape contractor. That was not for management, that was because we were going through landscape companies.
Yes.
It seemed like a dime a dozen, or whatever, they were just going in and out, in and out.
So we could rip this up.
Well, that is something that we probably don't need in our report every month, but that is something that needs to be done to be referenced for renewals of contracts.
I
for
would
landscape.
find it useful if we took certain sections and said, we're going to do it 3 times a year. And we said, this one section, we're going to do in January, May, and November. We're gonna do this other section in February, June. No, you're smiling, but what I'm saying is.
I smile.
Well, I'm saying is-
I think you're on the right track. It
I
says we
would-
need a,
so in
we
other
need
words,
a thorough.
I don't wanna just
100%
talk
recall.
about it, I'd like us to actually at the next workshop or something, say, that
Yes.
for the next board book, what's the schedule?
Okay, so I'm gonna put the board book on the workshop.
Yes,
Yes.
and Cindy's kind of, Cindy's obviously taking a big stab at it. Jackson has a lot of questions. You
If
brought
we wanna
up a
do
lot
some
of good
financials,
topics.
it's like June and December.
That one I don't think we can get by. I think all of your points are valid, that we are creating work that is not giving us the benefit that it's supposed to. So thank you. And wasting, well, and paper and more, and even more importantly, even though I love trees, management's time.
Right, that's.
Yeah, okay.
So one other clarification on
Yes.
any of these as we move towards a change. Like whether it's a KPI or we did experience this last Friday with the workshop on Spring Lake. if there's a change in criteria or the review process, I think that should be noted. In the workshop last Friday, when we were talking about Spring Lake landscaping, it was noted, and I reflected on this afterwards. You know, the scores were much lower, but we have a new person looking. That's important to know. So if we change our KPIs, whether it's from July to August or whatever it is, we need to know, we had a change of criteria effective this date. So the numbers may go up or down, better or worse, but we need to note that something changed.
So again, that's gonna be a thorough workshop committed to just the board vote. to make it better.
Absolutely, and that would be an important
At
part of
that
that.
point, then it's a line in the sand that we've changed the criteria. Okay,
Just on that topic though, David, I would say that the committee's numbers went down too that month. So it was an overall,
Okay. On Spring Lake.
yeah, overall,
So you feel that it was, the overall numbers did reflect a decrease in the
Yes.
level of landscape?
yes, the committee lowered their numbers as well.
And I think we would also want to include if there's other environmental things happening,
Okay,
like
Sure.
weather.
I'm getting the,
Yeah,
I'm
let's
getting
move on.
the let's move on topic, and I know Jackson, you have several other points about this, but I think we're gonna move on based on the management report. I think we all understand that we have to.
Let's take a look at it.
We have to take a big time, amount of our time to look at this. Okay,
Thank you for accommodating.
no, thank you for pointing it out, because I think you bring up a very good argument that we have let the board book grow exponentially without any benefit. Okay, action items. The first item is 1A, is a motion to appoint a new member to the Finance Committee, and that, we have an opening created by a resignation from the Finance Committee. And we have one applicant that has, that was considered, that's the best way, yes, thank you, considered during the previous.
Can we consolidate 1A and 1B? I'll make a motion to approve both.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? No,
For 1A, that was the person labeled as hold before or
Right.
next.
or next, I think it was.
Next, I'm
Next,
sorry.
whatever you have next.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve action items 1A and 1B regarding the Finance Committee and the Dog Park Committee. I'm gonna go ahead and take a roll call vote on this one since it is an action item. David,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Cindy, yes, Brian,
Yes.
Celia, and Kevin,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. So those two action items are passed. The next action item is a motion to approve pre-construction service bid for pickleball and adult lawn sports.
So I'm gonna jump in really quick. A comment was made in the beginning by an owner, and this was actually something that I had in mind and planned to bring up today.
Why don't
Let's
we,
have a motion.
yeah, let's have a
The table?
motion,
No, motion to discuss.
Well, no, make your motion. If you
make
want.
your motion. You want a motion to table it or you
I would
want?
motion to table this.
Second.
Okay.
And then,
And we are open for discussion on tabling the motion from the pickleball bid.
I'll disagree.
and I'll-
Let's just start with the conversation.
Yes, now we're open for conversation,
So,
discussion.
and I appreciate what you did. And I, for sake of clarity, I did an email today to the entire board. I've had a conversation with a person or two, just try to help get us up the learning curve, and then we'll have Neil jump in too. What we requested as a board, what we did not form a committee, we did not form a task force. That, it was never discussed, it was never voted on, so there was nothing there at all. What we requested was for management, and we made Neil the point person, to work on getting bids for Lot B for pickleball, or East Park for the croquet. We ended up adding possibly Heritage Hall for croquet, and we said we'd do Lot D for pickleball and Lot D for an addition for croquet too, so that we have the options. And we asked Neil to work with the pickleball and croquet groups, and that's what I believe we asked for. And we wanted a bid built in such a way that if we found out it was gonna cost $1 million and we could spend, and I'm making these numbers up, but we could spend 600,000 and defer pieces of it because we'd add a bathroom later, or we'd do something else later, so that we had the ability to do those pieces. So Joseph was 100% correct with his question. There was no roofing. And I'm going to call on Neil in a minute to brief everything, but there has been a group of individuals
who have met 8 times and who have met with Armco and other people to learn the proper process to do this. The reason I do not like tabling this is we as a board are working on the RFP, and we're gonna talk about this in a minute. Every one of us knows that's gonna be our life for the next 6 to 8 weeks, if we're being honest. And I don't want to defer this for 6 to 8 weeks, because I think what they're talking about and what they learned from Armco, who built the fields out there, which by the way, were supposed to cost 2.3 million, came in 4.7. And Armco came back and said, if you don't do pre-design, and I'm gonna let Neil correct me in a minute, but if you don't do pre-design and get your design right up front, then contractors don't know what you really want, and they come in very conservative, and they try to figure out your budgets, and you get screwed, to use a technical term. So what we're talking about here is not taking power away from the board, not empowering any task force or anything. We're talking about people helping Neil in his role as management. I still think it would make sense for us as a board to at least get the design process moving everything, so we're sitting around in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is, and having an intelligent conversation about this option versus this option versus this option, versus just tabling and deferring. Neil, can you add to what I said there? Anything right, wrong? Whatever.
I can add, I actually would also like to address Joseph's comment. So, this being called a task force, I 100% take ownership. As soon as Joseph kind of referenced that, I apologize, that is just pure industry institutional like default. Yes, so the board did not define a task force, they didn't define. These were the individuals and the volunteers that I sought out based on the board's original. Any label of them, I own that, my apologies. So, and that's why my email earlier today, I said, hey, if this gets tabled, I'm okay with that because I recognize it now. So, with respect to the money part, my request to the board with the recommendation is actually a non-monetary request. It was offered as the initial, well, you've already gone through the initial directive. Meeting with volunteers, we met with Armco, we met with 90, and really ultimately Armco, I mean, Brian, you summed it up perfectly. They said essentially is if you do design bid build, it's going to be 15 to 25% more. You lose all control essentially, and they are trying to back into a number. Plus, they put a contingency in a larger contingency into that packet for overruns. And then, sorry, lastly, we're gonna have to pay for this anyway. It's just you're paying for it up front versus them billing you on the back end for it. So yeah, everything you said, Brian, is a more condensed version of what the volunteers have been doing. And I also, I'm sorry, I know, I do want to publicly thank those volunteers. They have not only been here at 8 meetings, they have on their own, they've gone to other communities, they've reached out to other resources, they've visited other places. So kudos to those individuals that continue to push.
And we appreciate
And-
that. I think we have Brian, then David, then
Yeah,
Jackson.
and I'll get my last thing in and then I'll listen for a while. The recreation committee has not been involved. It's been brought to my attention, they should be. I have no issue with that at all. I don't think we have to table to get recreation involved. If we come up with pre-design, involve recreation. I'm happy to do that. I don't want anyone to think there's not money. In the email today, I said, ultimately, you're gonna pay 100, 125, something like that to do this pre-design. If we were not going to do pickleball and adult sports, we would need to have a real conversation. If we know we're committed to it, ultimately you need to get a design done. That is not a waste of money. It is an investment to save money. So with that, I'll listen.
Okay,
Yeah,
David.
very briefly, pre-construction bid makes a lot of sense. When I read the follow-up, makes a lot of sense. We lose very little money, and it costs very little money. So why not do it? This has been a priority for the community. Let's move forward with it and engage recreation committee. What we said 2 months ago, I think can still be the same. Management takes the lead. Work through the pre-construction bid and those scenarios. And then again, the comment about task force, to the opening comment, it's not a task force, it's an ad hoc group of residents.
And that was Neil, that was not
That's
the
fine,
board,
that's
so-
fine, and I jumped all over
Yeah.
that too,
And
Yeah, no,
because that gives some authority, and but we gave management the authority to move forward. So I think pre-construction bid is the way to go and not table.
okay, Jackson.
So I want to start by echoing the appreciation of the volunteers. There is a difference in my mind procedurally between ad hoc groups and task forces. We know how to create task forces. We know how to vet and appoint people to task forces. We are talking about a substantial expenditure of money. And four of us endured what happened when we let lobbyists
Thank you.
develop the program and management followed along behind. That's not you, Neil, you weren't here, you got nothing to do with it. But the reality is that this is a process that on March 10th, the board made a motion for management to come back to us with a proposal by July 10th. And that was the motion. Now, when I'm reading on page 176, it says, the previous motion was for the task force to solicit bids within Celebration. That is not correct. That is not what happened at all. And it further goes on at the end to say that this task force wants to, is not asking for monetary approval. And I agree, the pre-design, I have no disagreement with that. It makes perfect sense to me. But the process is wrong. And so what I'm asking for is either to amend this motion so that it is explicit that the decision is management's with the advice of people, but ultimately the board decides, and the board decides based on what management recommends, not what an ad hoc group of volunteers recommend. And I want those volunteers to understand our appreciation, but also to recognize that they are not the ones making the decision. And we have an appointed committee at Recreation that was not involved, which now can be, and I agree with Brian, and should be. And you heard from Joseph Lanahan, and I think the board all received an email from the chairman of the Recreation Committee saying exactly the same thing. Not opposed to pickleball, love pickleball, but we've learned some things in 3 years with the field complex. Let the Recreation Committee apply their expertise and experience to that process. So I supported the motion to table as it's currently written. If we can revise it so that it's clear that it is management taking the lead and management making the decision and bringing it back to the board, that it is not an ad hoc group making the decision, then I'll withdraw my second.
Kevin,
So this kind of goes full circle. So I appreciate this. This is the exact conversation that needs to happen. We have learned so much. These sitting at this table have learned so much, whether we talk about the fields and lobbyists, I like the term that was used. If we talk about committees, so let's talk about Artisan Park. There are subcommittees that were created last month or 2 months ago that turned into a concern. We all educated ourselves quite a bit since this all began that March 10th, really. And so I look at it more of the liability aspect. And let's go ahead and say there was something that happened. I in my gut say that's not the case. But what if something did happen? Are we opening more of liability by allowing somebody who's not officially on a task force or officially part of a committee act in these areas? This is a great opportunity. This is why you have a recreation committee. This is why you do create a task force. Those projects are not, if we cannot handle them, and if management cannot handle them, we need to go ahead and use some extra hands. They fall within those buckets. And I'm going to go ahead and go to a different example. And it's Gary is awesome, detailed, excellent. But we need to get out of the habit of naming specific people as just a neighbor helping out the community, because that's not truly how it works. They need to be part of the task force, part of the board, part of a committee, something. They can't just be a neighbor helping out, which is great, and we appreciate it. But for their protection and for ours, we need to go ahead and follow the process. And I feel like we do it too often with the best of intentions, but it turns around biting us in the back down the road.
Can I ask you?
well, I was gonna say, you're asking for, if we use volunteers, that they be in an official format of a committee or a task force, right?
And that was gonna be my question, which, as I think about potential liability and spending, clearly it's gonna be $1 million, we're done. Your recommendation is that we actually are gonna need to form a task force or a
Either a
committee.
task force or it falls
Support
within the
management,
recreation committee.
But we shouldn't have
One or the other.
ad hoc volunteers is probably the worst situation from their personal perspective and for us for insurance purposes.
Just one person says
Because
something.
they are-
it's
they
gonna
are not
turn into-
covered.
Go to the recreation committee and testify.
They are not covered by our, you know, insurance.
And they are welcome to attend the recreation committee meeting at which little
Voice
location
their-
is the
voice their
discussion,
But just
and that funnels up to us.
But to be clear, recreation it's got its mandate and its things. You need a committee that's thinking about pickleball, croquet,
Before-
whatever, right expertise.
For the fields,
For the
our
field.
biggest project, was there a task force?
No.
No.
That was a board management only.
And it did not.
There wasn't even, there's and recreation was only there to
Heck of a
help
job,
with rules. That's
Recreation
I don't-
was,
only there to help with rules and.
no,
Kind of after
no,
opening,
I sat on that committee.
after opening.
No, I was sat on that committee,
And what?
before I was on the board. Recreation Committee helped to design those fields and decided that it would be 1 artificial and 2 grass. It helped to conceptualize those fields.
Okay,
I didn't really.
so
Yeah.
we currently have a motion and a second to withdraw,
I will, I will,
or
with-
to table.
I will withdraw, I will adjust it if that's okay.
So we have he's gonna withdraw his
I'll withdraw.
motion, so there is no second.
So
there's
now we
no-
need a new motion.
So now we need a new motion, where do we stand?
I would make a motion that this project, let's call it that, is put into the recreation committee. To further review. If they feel as though it's too much for them, they need a task force, we can go that path. If we wanna go, if you wanna scratch that motion and go for creating a task force, we can do that. But it's gotta be one or the other.
So
No,
this would be
I think there's a
so,
third option.
So what you want is the pre-construction bid tonight. That's really what you're asking us, right?
I think recreation is the wrong place to put it, and because I don't think they have the expertise in pickleball, so I would like us, yes, the answer is I'd like to get us to pre-construction, but I think forming a task force or a committee, pick the right word, is something we should do, and I'll let Neil weigh in here if he wants, because then it's done properly. And then they should work in tandem with recreation so that we have expertise on what we're trying to build and recreation involved to think about bathrooms, parking, and a million other things that matter out in the field.
so if we form a task force, then we have to draft a resolution to form the task force and
Group members.
and get group members and do a whole approval process for the members. I think, and I know, just to make one comment, and I'll go to, our point in this was this has been lingering on for months, and when we started this process, it was, we need firm dates when we can get bids, we can get move forward, where we have something to actually review. And that's what this group of volunteers has started and well in the process. So I don't want to eliminate that,
I
but,
think there's a compromise that could be
all right,
arranged.
tell me which compromises.
With Kevin's approval, I would move to approve a design, to approve a, what do we call this?
Pre-construction
A
services.
pre-construction bid, and to create
Agreed.
a task force to work in conjunction with the board and the recreation committee to further those plans, all under the supervision of management.
When is the next
Is that-
time?
Perfect.
When is the
If that's a
next,
motion, I would second that,
Okay,
because that was exactly what I was gonna say.
and when is the next time that the board meets as a group for a workshop or anything?
That we would be-
May the 18th or something,
Today is
Friday.
26th.
June the
More
16th.
than 24 hours from now?
June,
In June, what's our
June
first meeting
18th.
date?
Oh, no.
June what?
June 18th is a
June
workshop.
18th is a workshop.
If we've approved the pre-construction bid, what else do you want to have?
Well, no, I'm trying to think,
So,
so who works on the pre-construction bid? That's what I'm asking.
Management.
Management,
yeah,
management, and they can see, so what happens between now, just so I have perfect clarity. So we will put out a call for volunteers to be on this task force. And management will organize the pre-construction bid, and people who are volunteers can volunteer to help in the interim until we form this task force.
Identical
Which we will do on
to-
June 18th. So we have a process of forward momentum while we're formalized, the group is gonna see us through to completion. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
can you clarify how this task force is going to interact with the recreation?
Well,
In a support.
I would say in a supportive role, the committee is in our structure, the place that things happen. And so I would think that this task force would present recommendations to the committee, they would debate them, discuss them, and make their recommendations to us. Just as I would expect this task force to go to the finance committee when it's appropriate and say, here's what this is gonna cost, and the run rate and so on. I mean, wouldn't that be the normal process, normal order?
The finance committee had always planned on looking at whatever we got back from that perspective, so the answer is yes.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, I believe.
What was the motion?
Just to develop, go ahead and approve the pre-construction bid and put out a call for volunteers to form a task force to direct the bid pre-construction,
Construction, see it through.
see the project. So we'll need to create a task force
Resolution.
resolution. Thank you.
Once
for the
built,
word.
it dissolves, it's the same as the
So
deal.
it is
and
a
goes
short
into
period of
recreation.
time for the task
So
force.
clarification on the motion, it's not just to do the call for membership, it's actually to form a task
Yes.
force.
Yes,
absolutely.
yes,
So
To
which
form
means
a task force.
resolution and
Yeah.
membership
yes,
in
yes.
terms of the minutes.
Okay,
And all of this under the supervision of management.
Yes.
yes, okay. You have a question? And then I'm gonna call the vote.
Okay, so how long is this all gonna take?
We don't know.
A while.
We don't know.
We're
The
2
task-
months into
It'd take
this.
2 years. I mean, it could,
The
I don't want
the
to, but
task
it
force
could.
is for a finite period of time, it's not an ongoing task force.
And the recreation committee doesn't meet until the 28th of June, so we're already out of line.
But this is gonna
That's okay.
proceed without, so in other words, I like saying they work in tandem with recreation, because I don't want to end up in this pure politics that the recreation committee has to approve what they're doing first. So they work in tandem with the recreation committee. There should be great communication. I don't want any confusion about that. Under the auspices of management and then report to the board.
Yeah, and to your point, Celia, if we waited another 6 months on building the ball fields, I think the four of us that had to vote over and over and over again would go back in a heartbeat and say, take 6 more months and get it right. These decisions don't go away, they haunt us.
I understand, but we discussed this in detail at all of our workshops. I listened to we asked management to use the resources with the pickleball people and the croquet people.
That's the issue,
And they
that's.
And they
That's what
did.
we, but that's what we need, they did what we asked, but we need to formalize it now to
Right.
continue to meet.
And actually, it was very positive that we did that because they came back with a better recommendation on
Right.
how to
Right.
proceed
Yeah.
to save
Exactly.
the community money. So the right things have happened. We're into now
It saves money.
whose ball field and how do we structure this and organize it? And how long is this gonna last? It's probably gonna take
There
18
is-
months to see it bring through completion.
There is one comment that it would be, they would have a request for proposal to attain the pre-construction bids, which is standard that we do an RFP on a project of this size. Okay,
Management would do that.
management would do that, yes.
Management would
Yes.
oversee it, yes.
Okay, just so that we.
So some of these just go in tandem with
Yes.
each other.
Okay.
I call it a-
I'm gonna call the vote. Everyone's, okay. David,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes,
Cindy, yes. Brian?
Yep.
I'm a yes. Celia?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so
Thank
we
you.
now have a plan to move forward, which I think is positive on.
quick, voting a bunch of stuff while Brian's gone.
Spend the money.
Okay, let's get back
Now
up
that,
to.
Diana, if you don't, can I just real quick, and I failed to say this, the reason I have come back, after soliciting volunteers, and if anybody watched the annual meeting, I was on the record saying, if you want to volunteer, I'll find something for you. The directive was to get these bids. Once I did solicit these volunteers, and honestly, they are subject matter experts, it became very clear that if we were gonna meet the deadline of just getting RFPs and bids, it was gonna be a disaster. And so that's why that's why I have come back with this request. Because the previous ways that we have done things have
I
hemorrhaged.
I
bank
agree,
accounts.
we do not want another situation like the ball field.
So
I get that.
you should, Celia, you should have had bids, unfortunately, when I got everybody in the same room.
Yeah, I'm not saying you did anything wrong.
No, but the original thing was to get bids, and once we were looking at it, it got murky really fast.
Okay, all right, next item on the agenda is to approve the key card access for the CCFC, yes.
I'm gonna move to table that.
I'll second.
And I'd like to just sort of update the committee or update the board on what the recreation committee said, and Celia was at that meeting as well, so please correct me if I'm
Okay.
misinterpreting. There are really two questions that they've got at the recreation committee about this. You see the picture up there?
Yes.
The green marks represent the two bathrooms in the concession area, and then a gate leading into the actual fields. The red area is the first big gate that's up there. And Patrick says this more eloquently than I am, but Wi-Fi doesn't get from the building to the red spot very easily. And so the more likely spots would be those places with the green. However, we don't know what it will cost to install internet, key card access, and gates that open and close on the basis of you just swiping your card. So we need, the Recreation Committee thinks that we need a cost estimate from management to implement that particular proposal. They also pointed out, and this was a little shocking to Celia and I because we did all those tours, that there's black netting. You can't see it exactly, but if you look where the green is, there's black netting that's there. All you have to do to get in is lift up the black netting. So, great, so.
So we don't have to have a key card?
So now I've given away the big secret, you don't actually need a key card. So that was the first part of it. And then the second part of this, the second option that the Recreation Committee looked at is maybe the better option than key card access is to have a staff person on site for the hours that we want to have access to the facility because there's equipment and there's issues around keeping the field safe. And, you know, we've got a lot of walking space in Celebration. It's not like that's the only place you can walk. But what would it cost to put a monitor or a set of monitors at that site on a full-time basis? So what we're coming to you to ask tonight is for direction from the board to get us a cost proposal for key cards and to cost out what it would take to put monitors on the site. And with those two pieces of information, then I think the board could move. Is that as fast as some people would like us to go? Probably not. But again, I'm not sure we want to just jump into this without knowing what it costs us.
I think those are valid questions. I mean, the internet access, you know, you're not gonna be able to navigate.
Did I say that right, Pat?
Yeah, we have internet access there, just won't reach the far end.
So you would need to put some sort of a booster signal system that you're gonna need an estimate for.
At the red spot.
At the red spot,
And
because
Celia,
that's.
did I state that properly?
Okay. My question on staffing is, do we have defined hours and has the rec committee thought about what defined hours they would like to recommend for having this open?
They got the impression that what the board wants is dawn to dusk and then some, because there's activity on the fields in the evening. So whenever we would say your key card would work, that you would then have to have, in lieu of a key card, you'd have to have someone there.
So we would need to define those hours.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know that dawn to dusk is exactly the right thing, if we're gonna have someone staffed out there. But I would ask for their recommendations on what they think would be most accessible to the residents. Ask the rec committee what they, what
We
hours.
spoke about it the other day.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Joseph wanted to open up the gates to everybody.
Right.
And we can't have that.
Why? That's exactly what we said I wanted.
Yeah, but everybody
Without a key card.
without a
Everybody
key
pays for it.
card.
Well, the people who paid for it.
Right, but
No,
he said,
yes.
are you saying without a key card?
Without a key
Oh,
card.
right, yeah.
He said, just leave the gates open from 7 AM to
For
10.
residents only.
No,
that's not even what he was recommending.
That's what he was recommending. That's why we have a problem with that.
Let me, I'm trying to look at this, because we've been talking about this for 2 years, this same situation, and we go round and around and around. So, couple things. One, before we invest into a card system, I'd like to go ahead and evaluate what we currently have. The system that we currently have, you don't know who used it. It's a, yes, you can enter, no, you cannot. That is all we have right now. That is not acceptable. When we have issues, and we've had them, we didn't know who it was that was there. That's not okay. So if we're going to start going this way, before we start paying for things that aren't working, let's find the right thing.
So you want a better system?
I want the
And
system that
we
tells
do
us.
think there are systems that do that.
There are,
I
they
mean,
exist,
sure.
it's very
We want
easy.
it open to the
The infrastructure likely is going to be the same infrastructure, it's just a programming aspect that may be a little different. So it really shouldn't be a matter of hardwiring anything differently. So I'd like to see that aspect. The second, I'd like to go ahead and really recognize what we're doing in that entire area and see where we want access to and not. We all talk about a boardwalk connecting to North Village. So we're talking about that as a possibility. Well, we're not gonna lock that up in the evening for that boardwalk access. So that boardwalk is going to continue through, past the sidewalk and all the way up to the library. That's something important that we need to recognize when we're putting a gate in certain areas and putting that money, that extra money in. So I really want to make sure that when we're talking about this, we're finding a true solution right now and not Band-Aids, because we've been finding Band-Aids for this project for 2 years and growing.
Me too.
Brian,
And growing.
Well, we're adding to that, because I agree with everything you just said. I don't want a solution where we're charging people rent to go use the fields.
No.
I wanna make sure we're on the same page here. We said, and then you've given me a quizzical look, because I thought I heard something the other day from the rec committee, we're not charging to use the pickleball courts, we're not charging to use croquet guards. We said we would charge for facilities that earn money like a soccer club, so that they can help reimburse some of the costs, but what we've established in the past and talked about the budget process is everybody in this town is paying $75 a piece for these fields. It's just like a pool and everything. We don't charge
Right,
people
it's
to
like
go use
going
a
into
pool.
was that,
So,
I'm not sure where that.
Well, I think it's a
conversation
little
was.
off topic, to be fair, but when we're ready to have the pay for play discussion, let's agenda it and we'll have the conversation. No one's decided anything, and I think it's a little disingenuous.
access-
Well, no, we
access.
clearly had the conversation as a board. Maybe you weren't on the board, but I wanna make sure, we're talking about opening this up so people can get in there and we're not charging them. So that, and I think we probably got maybe we got 6 votes to 1 on that one, but that's where we. No, I'm not trying to be a jerk, I'm just trying,
Alright,
I'm
let's
trying to
get
get everything out, is what I'm trying to do.
So,
Okay, I don't think we're there yet, and I haven't said that, the recreation committee hasn't said that. And I don't want to create an alarmist view that that's what we're doing, that is not at all what's happening.
okay,
And it has nothing to do with key card access, so
so keep,
different time, we'll have.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but what we need to do is define what exactly we want to send back, because obviously we have a motion and a second to table this. So we need them to go back and we need management to get bids on what it would take to get a key card system at our request of an
But
upgraded
I
tracking
thought we
system.
were also reviewing this at the recreation committee, and going back to the recreation committee. So it's important that the recreation committee understands what it is the board is wanting,
Absolutely.
Right.
which I think is open resident access, it's not a park for the entire community.
Right.
That,
So-
just to be fair, that is the topic, the motion to approve key card access for residents, the CCFC field, so that comes down to access of residents and how they get access,
So
that
we're
is the conversation right now.
So it is only resident, and I think the comment is that there was discussion about opening it up to everyone, but that is not our plan, or that's not.
But no, so if I have a key card, just to be fair, if I have a key card and I'm a CROA resident, I can go there anytime I want within its hours or
Yes.
not,
Yes,
Yeah, 7 to 10.
and we're
10
without paying extra.
right,
Right.
Okay.
that's
Walk
fine,
around
that's
the
fine.
tent, have a
And
picnic
I think-
day or.
But I think even there, the devil's in the details. So my sister and my son come in from Manhattan in Illinois. I can bring them to the field if I have it. So I mean, we're not gonna, when we start talking about having a monitor at the field full time, it's not, I don't think it's like the pool where you're checking for pool IDs. Or if it is, we gotta have that conversation too.
I think the issue around the monitor was really around safety.
I'm-
There's a lot of nets
And I
and equipment and
And
field out there
protecting
that
our-
could be damaged. And
our
so they just want to
vendors.
protect, they just want to protect the asset. I don't think it's a.
Right, and maintaining the facilities and.
So
that
fair,
people
that entire
bathrooms.
corridor, when fully developed, will call for somebody to be there.
I think we're gonna have like,
Without
lakeside
that.
security, because we're gonna have people who, we're gonna have a need.
Well, and maybe that's the way it ends up going, is that it's a security instead of a staff person, I mean.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
I think the committee just wants to get those numbers in hand to be able to make a good decision.
so,
Well, hang on.
okay, go ahead. and
So
then
if
we'll
we're
come back
talking,
to
if we're
that.
talking about having somebody there, I mean, just to make sure that nobody was there, can't spray paint and sprays everything. Rather than doing the whole key card swipe thing, which sometimes goes down and blah, blah, blah. Why don't you build a cute little, like a phone booth?
Bill,
Little phone booth, and put somebody in there. And people come up and they show them their ID card,
So that's a staff.
and they go
person.
beep, and the gates open, and then they close.
That's what, yeah, but
Let
that's
me
gonna be
see
fun.
TCC approve that.
I don't know why they would.
perhaps it's
Yeah, it's just-
necessary.
I don't know why they weren't
Well, I mean, that's,
I mean.
I like it.
automation could be our friend here, but we gotta look at the bids and see what exactly.
But the goal, just to be clear, because I'm really nervous about what just was raised here. The goal is for residents who have key cards to always have access to our facilities, and nothing has changed there, and nothing is changing there.
Okay.
So those of you that are watching, before you know, the assault comes on social media later tonight. We are not charging people to use the
No.
fields if they are not part of an organized event. And we are not talking about anything different.
And thank you for clarifying, that's good. Okay,
Thanks, Mr.
all right,
Gensel.
so have we given,
With you, people are on board who need to be hearing this conversation, so I'm happy you said that.
so do you, as a representative of the rec committee, have enough guidance from what our conversation
As
to
soon as we
move
take this
forward?
vote, I do.
Okay, so the vote is to table this, now that we've had an open discussion, that you will take back to the rec committee, and I will call the vote.
Is there any, can I just ask you a
Yes.
follow-up? Is there any realistic scenario on a time frame? I mean, what I'd love to do is, if we had a bunch of teenagers that wanted to go kick a soccer ball in July or August, I'd love to,
Yeah.
for us to make a decision fast so that they could actually do it.
School's out this week.
They could today, really. They would go there. There are monitors during the day that are there. That it is possible to get on the fields. I mean, it's not totally locked
By
up.
lifting the gate, by
Well, by
lifting the
the
net.
gate, there's that. But we do have monitors. We do have monitors out there. They're not out there every hour.
It's locked quite a
This
bit.
is, this is ignorant of me, yeah, that's what I'm asking, is that gate open, do they open it in the morning and close it in the evening?
They open
I
it
really
when
don't
there's an
think that
event.
gate goes open unless someone's renting the fields today.
That's
We're talking about a change in the, you correct me if I'm wrong, Suzanne.
No.
But I think that's the business. I tried to get back there and I couldn't because I didn't know you could lift.
Well, the gate is, right, hold on, let's, we're kind of getting all over the place in too much conversation. So the gate is locked unless there is an event or someone is renting the field.
That's a change.
And that, the big gate, the red up there on that picture. Okay, one last comment, we got two more comments, Celia and David. Celia, was that all you wanted?
I just wanted to make
Okay.
sure we're talking about the residents.
The red gate, David.
So this is going to the rec committee to digest. And what this last discussion suggests is they could think about phasing, to go to Brian's point. So it's like, we can recommend that immediately we open the gates between blank and blank, but then we move towards key cards, because that's gonna be a X dollar expense, and then we have to bid it, and then it takes 5 months.
I agree, I
So
think,
it's a,
I would be.
talk about
With a
phasing,
phase.
talk about phasing with
So
the rec committee.
Is the motion to table this and return it back to the recreation
Yes.
committee to further investigate?
To further investigate, see,
And recommend a phase solution in a timely manner.
and then they come back to the board,
Okay.
okay.
so there may be
Alright, Celia
several.
first and then Kevin. Celia.
So the way this sentence is read is motion to approve key card access for residents to the CCFC field. Why can't we approve that motion? Because we know we have to move forward on getting prices.
Because we don't know that would be the
That may
ultimate
not be the
solution.
answer.
No,
It may
it
not
might be staffing.
I would also just point out for the rest of the board, Joseph Lenahan, who's on the Recreation Committee, is on this call and watching. I'm sure the other members of the committee will be able to get the recording. So the intent of what we're discussing here can be conveyed if I'm, or Celia are not confident to do that.
Yeah, there's other people from the rec committee. Okay, you had a comment and then.
My
I'm
only
gonna call
addition
the-
is I don't know, and Patrick, you tell me, and technology committee, if they should be involved in reviewing possible additional. Only if that's not gonna drive you crazy. If you know something and you can do it, just bring in the option and say, hey, perfect. But I think they may need to look over it as well.
I think we'll leave that in management's hands. If they need to get the technology committee aware, and we can do that. Okay, call the vote. We are tabling this motion with new direction to the rec committee.
Yes,
Yes, Jackson,
Yes.
Cindy? Yes. Brian?
Yes.
Diane is yes. Celia, yes?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
We're rolling.
Maybe, all right, pop that agenda back up there, please. There we go. Like that.
Landscape maintenance.
Landscape maintenance, okay, are there any of these that we can combine together, because these are,
I think there's a separate discussion under item 5.
Yeah.
okay, but we haven't gotten,
Let's
okay.
keep going.
Yeah, but
Okay.
actually has. three
Okay,
different
motion
names.
number 4, or action item number 4 is motion to approve landscape maintenance replacements in the amount of $9,820, which is a CROA replacement reserve expenditure. Do I have a motion?
Yes.
So, Brian, I'll second.
Okay, so we have a first and a second. Any discussion or questions?
Just help me understand it a little bit. I don't know if I understand.
Tim, do you want to talk about these?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Go from.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
There you go.
Go ahead.
All right. So yeah, it will be the amphitheater. We're cleaning up. This is to propose to clean up the preserve area at amphitheater. North Village plant replacement, replacing a tree right by in between the pavilion and the pool, and Spring Park natural area cleanup as well. So that's what all this entails. And by cleaning up the preserve, it would be removing invasive vines, invasive plants that are choking out the good natural plants that we have down here in Florida. And just to clean it up a little bit to prevent any trees from dying, falling, all that.
Clean up. Okay, that
I
makes
think the
sense.
North Village one has some of the shrubs being replaced too, some of the waxworks.
Oh yes, the on the commons part, few of the shrubs will be replaced as well.
I see that there's 20 of those that are gonna get replaced as well on the bid. Okay, any other further questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So in the Spring Park, which is a natural area, are you talking about the boundary that goes around the field with all the
Yep.
trees and bushes and stuff?
Yep.
So you're just gonna clean it up?
Yeah.
Because that used to be a lot lusher. There were many, many more plants and things in there. They came in, they cleaned it up. And I'm afraid if you go in and just clean it up again, you're not gonna have anything left.
I see. Well, the biggest thing will be taking the vines.
See through it. You know, you couldn't see through it, there were little plaques, this kind of tree, you know, kind of as you walked along, but like I said, remember Diana? When they cleaned it up, and there were all these holes, and now things have died. So if you go in and just clean it up, it's gonna be like a bunch of these things. Like
It says in the bid, they're gonna remove vines, shrub vegetation, dead trees will be removed for the purpose of promoting growth and trees of palmetto, lower wildlife risks, and more attractive appearance.
So Tim, maybe
4250.
go over to Mattamy when they're clearing out Island Village, just ask for a couple of them and we can throw them around the perimeter or something.
Just
I do agree, it needs to be.
I just think that there needs to be some, I mean, cleaning up is great, but I also think they should think about planting something there as well.
Okay, so that can be another direction that we take, I agree, as far as adding.
Because it looks really kind of sad.
Spring
People
Park.
goes around Spring Park in the
Spring
back,
Park
by
around
the
that
soccer
field.
fields and stuff.
Same is true.
Okay.
Well,
So we need
First,
more-
too, I can all look into see if we can add anything into those areas, or if it's just meant for natural growth and we can't add anything. I'll look into that.
All right, very good. We have a motion and a second. David,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes,
Brian, Diane is yes, Cecilia? Kevin?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Action number 5, action item 5. Agenda, I can read that far. Going slowly.
On page 184.
Yes, thank you. Motion to approve the concrete grinding and replacement by Vice Painting not to exceed the amount of $32,061, a CROA replacement reserve expenditure.
I'll move to approve.
Okay, motion to approve,
Second for
second.
discussion, go for it.
Kevin for discussion. Thank you.
What properties specifically are we talking about?
All right, so I think the big one would have been Long Meadow, right around the playground and by the pergola. You got some trees there with the sidewalk. The sidewalks actually go around it to create a triangle. A lot of those are lifting, so those would need to be replaced. But then there's just throughout all the parks, there's certain sidewalks that just need to be grounded.
When they replace the sidewalks, are they gonna cut out roots and stuff like that?
Sorry, I can't. Can you?
When they cut out when they fix the sidewalks, are they gonna cut out roots and stuff?
Oh, absolutely, yes. We'd cut the roots out to prevent this from happening in the near future.
Because they actually fixed the
Because it doesn't
sidewalks.
say that in the.
It doesn't say that in
It
the
doesn't say that in the scope of work.
The reason I asked that is they fixed the sidewalk in front of my house and they cut an 8-inch root. Which, you know, sounds big, it was big, it was bigger than me. And you know, and you've got a nice piece of sidewalk, but, so we're gonna go to the places that need fixing, prepare the ground properly, cut the roots, and then put in new sidewalk.
So would this also include Lakeside? And I know Celia's been asking about bricks that are uneven and roots and things are growing up there. Would it include anything like that, or is it just sidewalk?
This is just sidewalks.
It doesn't say anything about Lakeside and the bricks.
No, and I'm waiting on a few quotes for that part in Lakeside down there by the petanque court.
Okay. Any other questions, David?
Yeah, so two things concerned me. One was the ambiguity in this. Well, actually, three things. One was the roots, and so I didn't see that there. Second is the ambiguity, because, I mean, this is the first time we're here in Long Meadow, so I didn't have a sense of how what the scope was. And then third, this is all about, it looked like the actual contract was about concrete replacement rather than the grinding. And so is 32,000 plus change the cost-effective way to go? Is it better to have our own grinder? I don't know the answer.
I would like more specific about where, and it says just the total number of feet, but it doesn't really say where that is located. I agree we need more.
And is there a better option just moving forward?
Well, so I think that, you know, to Kevin's point, that Long Meadow Playground needs, if you've been over there, we've had the spray painted, we've had residents reach out to us. So it's not to exceed that amount, so if you like, you can amend it just to address Long Meadow for now. And I think that what they do is they go out there and they evaluate, is this one where we can just shave, or is this one that's too high, we're gonna have to dig it up and replace it, so that's kind of on call when they're at the site.
So it varies.
So that's why.
So that's not
for
clear.
quotes.
That would be part of that justification in your documentation of the
Okay.
fund, just to be clear with what it is.
Okay.
That, just what you just said. When they go out, they'll make a judgment, and the total cost would not to exceed. So, you know, you may get more footage when you grind it versus when you.
I feel better knowing that.
Yeah, just to say that,
Okay.
that's the purpose of those cover pages.
Okay.
One I would definitely be supportive of going after because of safety aspects. For those, we should really take care of that right away. Thinking outside of the box a little bit, I believe the CDD has their own team that actually does this. And I would like to see maybe if we ask them, you know, what they would charge, it might actually be in our favor.
CDD is so far behind. I'm afraid.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what they would charge, they get to it in 9 years.
Well, I don't like their work overall.
I'm not talking about quality work, I'm talking about they have a team working full time and they can't keep up with what they should keep up with.
So they're not
They're talking about
opening
whether they have to
subcontract.
hire
Yeah,
more
they
people or
discussed
how they
this,
just.
they discussed this last night, and they're months behind.
So they can't subcontract out to us.
No, because they talked about whether or not they needed to go out and
Got
subcontract,
it, okay.
because they can't get it done in-house apparently.
But to your point, what are their insights about whether to bring something like this in-house? And then the largest question for us is what is our ownership of sidewalks, and is it even a good investment?
Well, if I can.
And I don't know the answer.
What they have learned, they talked about this last night, those machines grind themselves up. If you try to order a machine now, you're waiting 6 months, 9 months, a year because of all the backlogs we hear about with everything and stuff like that. Us bringing this in-house is something that would be wonderful, 2023 conversation, but in the near term, impossible, I think, based upon their conversation last night.
Based on what we learned from them. Okay.
So in the meantime, are these safety concern areas clearly marked, spray painted? Are they currently
Yes.
spray painted?
Yeah.
Can we
Yes.
possibly approve doing Long Meadow and then have management come back and give us more information on other areas?
Yeah,
We want
I'm
to
okay with
amend,
that.
who motion, you motion? I don't know who
Yeah, I
seconded.
made a motion.
Who seconded?
Jackson.
Jackson, do you want to
I
amend
did,
your
I did.
motion?
I'll amend my motion.
Sure, second.
Okay, how would you like to amend your motion, sir?
So the motion would be to empower, so the motion would be to empower Vice PD to hire management to do what needs to be done in Long Meadow, and then for management to come back with a recommendation for other areas so we can better understand it.
What he said.
Okay, that's your motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. Okay, Dave,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Brian, Diana's a yes, Celia?
Yes.
And Kevin? Okay, figure, I think that's a good solution, just
Sam,
on,
do you understand that?
Yes.
I would just say on future, just we need more specifics on those, because that'll eliminate some of this conversation.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, motion to approve the purchase of 12 Ventura Series California umbrellas for Lakeside Pool in the amount of $5,760, CROA replacement reserve expenditure. This was tabled from our last board meeting. Do we have a motion?
Make the motion for purposes of conversation.
And,
I'll second.
okay, we have a motion and a second, conversation.
So can we put the picture up there, Patrick, that's down at page 2? So when
Which one?
I look at that blue umbrella, there are people in this room who are much more expert than me. That looks quite a bit smaller than the white umbrella. Are we spending money on something that's quite a bit
Well, there's
smaller?
only one white umbrella there. There's only one there.
But I'm
That's my
providing a
umbrella.
smaller umbrella. People usually use umbrellas in the summer here for sun coverage. I'm asking a question.
You're asking what size are they buying?
That white umbrella is in the ground.
That's a
It's
permanent
not
fixture.
a
I'm
table.
asking, okay, ignoring all that, I'm asking if it's too small an umbrella, then we.
So, if this is the same size as our current umbrellas, I think it would be acceptable, the orange umbrellas that are there. I think
Is
it
it the
wouldn't be a
same,
problem.
so we asked the
That's the
question,
question.
is it the same size as our current umbrellas? Who can answer that? Tim?
My guess is that it's.
It's just.
Tim, to you.
Tim is not,
Sorry, I forgot to hit the mute button. Yes, everything I'm seeing so far, it is the same size.
okay,
Okay. So, I tabled this last month because I wanted to get a little more understanding because I have a problem with umbrellas, I don't know, that's.
well, just. you know,
There-
Well,
there's been
Thank-
some history
Yeah.
with these
Discussed
umbrellas.
umbrellas since 2018.
I have a hard time because we just purchased a lot of these. They sat for nearly a year without any use. I don't believe they were properly stored. That has nothing to do with those people in this room right now. So it's nothing against anybody here. But there is umbrellas that went home to employees' homes. That, yeah, I received a picture of it from a resident that lived across the street. And it was damaged supposedly and it couldn't be repaired. And whatever, Steve was aware of it at that time.
That's long.
Surprise.
That's a year and a half ago. It's a year and a half ago. So I have some concerns with it. Now, I want to make sure it's done right moving forward if we're going to approve this. I want to have a little confirmation that they will be stored properly, as all of our items should be. I know things happen. I know COVID just kind of kept on going, and then all of a sudden we were at almost a year. The second thing I would like to potentially review, these umbrellas do not, like the white one, they do not stick into the ground. I do believe looking at this pool and other pools, it may be of benefit to do a core drill. And it kind of prevents the residents from moving furniture, moving umbrellas, moving things around. It gives you better safety leverage when it comes to if there's storms or kids climbing in, whatever the case is. We bought them once, I learned, we bought them twice, learned. So I want to be sure that what we're doing is the right thing moving forward.
I agree with, we need to secure them better because I've been at the pool and the wind will take them and throw them. And that happens very.
So if they are core drilled, you can look at Tucci, very expensive umbrellas. I purchased them at one of the companies and they are still good almost 10 years later with very little fading here in Florida, construction grade, up and down every day, multiple times.
So are these considered, it says these are sturdier umbrella that should last longer.
Sturdier compared to the previous company. I don't know, the
Also,
previous
want to
manufacturer.
mention, Kevin, that we did find, looking into this more after it was tabled, that in the reserve study, it does have umbrellas replaced every 3 years because of the wear and tear. So it is an item that gets replaced a lot.
So one thing to keep in mind, Tucci, as an example, they're out of Miami. They are a bit more expensive up front. Their warranty aspect is phenomenal. And it will be something that's cool. The water parks use that's who a lot of the companies that you'll see for commercial aspect. And I really feel as though that might be a better investment, and we might be able to get 4 or 5 years out of them. And that same reserve money just helping with the maintenance of it. And we're not going through this all the time. So that would just be my 2 cents on those.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and we have a second. And this is to replace the umbrellas for $5,760. Any other conversation?
Well, I'm curious about Kevin's question. I mean, could we, if we approve this, we're buying from this particular vendor, right? So we're not looking at that. Could we also ask management to look into this as a future possibility and for other locations, and to look at the possibility of drilling those cores with the sense to protect the asset?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if we sat here and we said, we're gonna make this decision because it's June first and we find out we can't get the umbrellas until October first, because right now we all know that everything is slow, then we're better off investigating Kevin's question.
Well, we can find out and, you can make the motion pending that. I will say that the last meeting, there were umbrellas for what, 4 or 5 different pools?
Right.
And, Tim and I talked and we just decided to put Lakeside forward first because they had gotten together and kind of moved some of the umbrellas that shared the colors, and then we would see how this brand worked, as far as durability before going on and spending money with the other one. So we can look and see how long it takes to get, and then do some research on.
I mean, the page on here says the fabric ships, the fabric umbrella ships within 10 business days, but I don't know how accurate that is. No one asked how realistic that shipping commitment is.
What was the brand?
TUCCI.
Yeah, I just looked it up. I said, family teach. It's, no, it's spelled it. Okay. All right, so do we want to make this, how did you say it again, Suzanne?
Well, pending, delivery, if it's, if we can get them soon, and if not, we can look at another alternative.
And you also have the comment about we need to look at drilling these so they are more stable into the ground so they don't fly away. Okay?
But you can't do that with just any umbrella, can you? It has to be,
There are several brands, that's one that I'm
but I
familiar
mean, with this umbrella we're buying,
would not be, but they, to Susanna's credit, they did go ahead and move them around to kind of consolidate where they can, so
They're stable.
if they really do come in within 10-20 days, it does make sense to just get them for Lakeside and then continue the homework.
But then let's get pricing for the TUCCI umbrellas, let's get the warranty and stuff like that, so we have the information, because we're always buying umbrellas from somewhere. So the next time we buy 10 of them and
We see how it
we
can
do a
really.
comparison. It's
If we get a
healthy
longer
thing.
life.
I'd like to do the research irrespective of the motion, because, if we can reduce, flying weapons, I would really like that. So, I mean, I don't think the research can hurt. I mean, the worst that's gonna happen is we get sticker shock and we just keep going with what you guys have.
Okay,
I'm fine with that. I think
so we go ahead and, we're gonna move forward with this. We have a motion, we have a second to go forward with this approval. David,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Cindy,
yes,
Yes.
Brian, Diana's yes, Celia? Kevin,
Yes.
okay. All right, I think that's really good conversation and thank you for recommending that because I think that's something that we need to possibly look into. All right, so the next section. Okay, so the next item is motion to initiate the finding process on 38 non-compliance items through notification of the covenants committee meeting to approve or reject the fine.
It's still
It's
30
updated,
It's gone down to 17.
Do we have that?
I
did
can pass
not
that
receive
sheet out
that.
for you.
it was in, I did get.
I did email it, but
I'm sorry, I must have been late.
I didn't
We'll
get
do it
the
with the school.
I did not.
I did not get the email.
No, we don't.
I make a motion for 17 items.
I'll second the
Second that
motion.
Okay, do you, and any discussion?
Yes, I have some discussion.
Okay, I can solve the same,
It's all the same.
No
So,
one got it.
so
Well.
I want to just, I want to restate my concern about how this report is organized. I would like very much. Oh, thank you. Oh, got one more?
That's okay.
Okay. I would like some sort of an aging category here. How long has this been in process? How many, are we talking about 30 days, 60 days, 90 days?
The dates are on there.
So
Well,
if you look at the one that's listed as number 1, it has 9/16 and 11/6/20.
so could we put these in the order in which they started? So we can see what's oldest and what's newest? It's,
I think they are.
I'm not sure how that.
are they?
They look pretty.
I mean, there's a few of them that aren't.
No, they're not. Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's just how
They're
they ended
not,
up.
I don't
on
think
the
they
list.
are,
Okay.
but my point about this is that one of the ways that this is useful for us, besides the fact that we have to move to approve this to go in, is that I think it's a useful report. This is a very useful report for us to understand what's going on with covenants, with the finding process. We've had that discussion at the workshop. about refining and streamlining some of those processes. And this would be very helpful to know how long things are lingering. And it would also be helpful to be able to see this before tonight. But, you know, we've got a whole bunch of holiday decorations. Did those get resolved this week after, and we talking about holiday decorations from Christmas and now we're in the end of May? It would be just helpful to know that stuff,
So
so.
you're asking for more detail, but
Yeah,
the original board book had all those items, so they've obviously been resolved between the board books to now.
Yeah, the reason you get this updated paper tonight is people put it in fixes and they do one last inspection today, literally.
I understand.
Yes.
A lot of holiday decorations got taken down apparently this morning.
If I could clarify on that, I appreciate the input, Jackson. I'm happy to organize it by date to give you more reference as to what's most aged on this list. But Brian is correct. We have to go out the date of the board meeting to follow up on these, and that's why the report is given to you at that hour. The other thing was the decoration. So we just don't have the manpower right now to follow up at that 2-day, 7-day mark. We know that if we were to follow up and close it, great. If we're not able to close it, we also cannot send a letter, because the next step at that point is for the board to propose fines. Ideally, we want to get out there immediately to follow up on that, but we just don't have the staff right now to follow up on all of these when the result could be nothing.
So we have a motion and a second to do 17 non-compliance items. David?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Brian? Diana's yes? Celia? Fine. Or Kevin?
Yes.
All right, we'll move forward from that item. 3 fines to specific assessments. We're still at 3?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have 3 items that are going to be moved from fine to specific assessments, will be added to the residents' accounts. Any discussion? David?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Brian? Diana's yes. Celia? Kevin?
Sorry, I was trying to double check a house because I know the same house of number 1. has been-
190, page 197. Where we're at.
It's not that far.
You have to ask Susanna, sorry.
Oh,
It's that same house with the fence.
Oh,
same street. I don't know, is that the same house with the fence?
it is.
I'm going to be in that.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to explain.
You're looking at property number 1?
Property 1 on the converting these to specific assessments. Go ahead.
This, I'm trying to figure how to say it correctly. There have been concerns with this property owner throughout the community often. And cut me off if I'm saying
This
something.
is someone who buys and resells.
They will buy, fix up, resell. And I do not know this person, I've never met this person. But I will say I appreciate what this person has done to the community. As far as they've taken something that needed help and fixed it up and cleaned it up. They usually attempt to go outside of the box a little bit sometimes. They do go through the approval process, most times, not every time. Something that, and I say the fence because the fence went up and there's a whole bunch of fighting going on with a wood picket fence and the way the brackets were set up and the fact that they're outside and inside. We recall that.
That was
This was an
we
appeals
dealt with
thing
that.
that time,
Is
yes.
that this same property?
Same,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
That's where I'm saying,
Thank you.
I don't know if there's more or not to this, but I'm just not comfortable proceeding on
Okay,
this.
so you're a nay on this.
So I'm a nay. I'm happy to separate this from the others if you'd
Thanks.
rather. I'm fine with the other 2, but.
Would you like Jessica to give some history?
I would love to clarify if you would want that.
We have 6 votes.
It's fine.
6 votes to pass, 7, 1 nay, the motion passes. Okay, but I do understand that it has been, okay.
Can we ask management to follow up though on this? I mean, I
Yeah.
was the same property and I'm not gonna pull my vote back, but I would like to know.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, next item on the agenda is to approve 7 fee waivers as requested by residents and recommended by management.
So moved.
Second.
Second, any discussion, any questions on this?
I just wanna say on page 2, the middle one,
What
If you
page
look
is
at-
that?
It's item number, can you
Number
say
6,
5,
it
6,
has the page 2 of
It's 1
2,
99, right?
Mhm.
number 6?
Got it.
I don't have, oh yeah, there's Taylor number.
Mhm.
The explanation, I just wanna say, you know how unlikely that is. Not that I have a problem,
Yeah.
but I mean, that is so unlikely,
Oh, because your bank history?
that is so unlikely, but I'm just throwing that out there.
All right, so we have a motion, and a second, any other
Okay.
discussion?
Going to
Exactly.
number one, that was on last month.
Yes.
It's still recommended by management to approve.
I did send some information
You
via
did have
email
that.
on that one.
Any other questions or concerns? All right, David,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Diana, yes, Celia? And
Yes.
Kevin. All right, motion passes. All right, so we are now to next item, which is our, David, did you have, we talked about the timeline. The next is the board update on the management RFP process. And I had sent everyone a memo, or a kind of a new timeline or an updated timeline showing where we are at from current through the end of the RFP process. So let me kind of cover that for the residents that are on the call as well. So as we all know, our RFP proposals will be received June 1st. All CJC, CROA, and CANOA board members will receive an email copy of each proposal with a copy of a transmittal letter reminding them of the confidential nature of the material. Anyone who wants a printed copy of that needs to let me know by the 31st.
Of those people.
Of those people, not general, of those people listed, a CJC, CROA, or CANOA board member needs to let me know if they want printed, and we will get them printed. On July 2nd, we're gonna hold a joint meeting of CROA, CANOA, and CJC boards in executive session from 9 to noon. We will be determining our finalists at that point that will be invited for an on-site review. On July 2nd, from 9 to noon. We must decide how many we want at that point, whether we have 6 finalists, so somewhere between.
Somewhere between 3 and 4.
As you can tell, Brian's vote will be for 3 finalists, okay?
And just to be clear, that meeting will have the CROA, CANOA, and CJC boards all present.
Yes, everyone, and well, we are requesting everyone that can at all possible be present in person, but we do have to have a Zoom option because there may be someone who can't, but we would definitely want more present than not. We will also notify the companies of their status on July 3rd, whether they've been scheduled for an interview or they've been eliminated from the interview process. We have determined 4 interview dates, which are the 23rd, the 22nd, the 29th, and the 30th. That gives them basically 10 days to finalize their analysis and what they're going to finalize our analysis at the end. 22, 23, 29, 30 of July.
This was all in an
It's all in
email.
the memo that was.
All the memos that you sent.
That's fine. Okay. The interview format, we will have participants of CROA board, CANOA board, the finance committee, the technology committee, the RFP committee, and then we're going to invite the chair people of the covenants, the art, the dog park, recreation, and special events. We did, and one question we should answer is if the chairperson cannot attend, will they be allowed to designate someone to attend for them? We'll have a 9 a.m. start time. We'll ask for a 45-minute presentation from the company, which will be recorded and will be posted for residents to view after all interviews have been completed. CROA board member Q&A. Each CROA board member will have no more than 15 minutes to ask questions, including the response time. CANOA will go into a private executive session with the companies for a 30-minute private interview to focus on the CANOA part of the contract. And then we will finalize the day with CROA private interview with Paige Pierce from CJC with any final questions and wrap up. We anticipate the day running anywhere from 9 a.m. to 2.
So
Ish.
for a little clarity there though, we will have,
we will have these other people inside board members that they cannot ask for. So when we talk about, let's say 9 to 9:45, bathroom break, blah, 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 start at 10, between 10 and noon, each board member gets 15 minutes. So that's an hour and 45 minutes. We'll have a timekeeper, and so you as a board member can go where you want to go, what you think is important from proposal, papers and stuff you've seen. That gets you to noon each, short break for lunch. Then their half hour without an old private and the CROA private.
That we will
After
finalize
that,
that question.
with a wrap up, because if you think about it, we will, and the reason we're talking about private with that, without all those other people in the room, you're gonna want to ask about the financial solvency, the ability to raise capital, their ability to have things where they would answer private questions they wouldn't want to do in a public forum.
Any questions?
Just to be very, very clear,
Mhm.
from June 1st, when we get the proposals, to the decision time, all of that is not recorded. It is not public because we're in the bidding process.
Yes, these are private.
So when we
private.
share the proposals with the 6 proposals that come in, that gets shared with that select group. Each of us gets a transmittal letter, basically saying that this is confidential and not for sharing. We will tape record, as you said, the 45-minute session, and that gets shared with residents after the last company has had their presentation. So no company sees another person's presentation.
So
And
after
what's
So that
it's
becomes
done.
public to the community.
And what's not said on here is on June 1st, we talk about going to the board members, but it's also going to go to the finance committee, the technology committee, and the RFP task force with that same cover letter. We made a decision. I will be the finance committee person. Diane is going to work with the RFP task force. David's going to work with technology. So they have one liaison in their meetings, but none of the other meetings. So that way there's not undue influence from any one of the 3 of us. Those materials will go to all the boards on the 22nd of June. So you will have 10 days to review those.
Now, and as part of that, their meetings and their discussions are also the RFP, the technology and the finance, they will all be in executive session, not open to residents.
And this is all vetted, as we know from our discussion with our attorney, because we're in the bidding process.
Let me jump forward to the additional dates. So that is, the interviews should be finalized on July 30th. August 1st, we're gonna post the company videos to the town hall website. That's the same place we've been posting other RFP information that is behind the password part of the town hall website. August 4th, we'll hold a resident Q&A with the board. It will be a hybrid meeting, meaning that the board will be here on site and will offer Zoom to the residents to ask that we're open for questions. We will be here-
Questions or comments?
Yeah, questions, comments, concerns, thoughts. It's really a resident-driven meeting. We'll be here for whatever we set the time period for to answer any questions. On August 9th, we will go into executive session, meaning CROA, to select our company finalists. On that day, we also just talked about that following that meeting, we will have a CCS meeting where we will ratify the decision of the CROA board. On the 10th, CNOA and CJC have their regularly scheduled meetings where they will ratify the CROA decision, and they will make their decision whether that is in executive session, which it likely will be. That's their decision to make. And August 11, we'll notify the finalists of the results of their interview. And then we will announce the offer to negotiate a contract to manage celebration, which means basically they have the offer, and then we start negotiating the contract with our attorney to move forward. And then we start with the new contract transition, whether it's a transition plan or just the transition to the new contract, depending on who is selected in the interview process. Now, open for questions, concerns, timelines, whatever. Yes.
Have you given any more thought to how we're going to, because we don't want, I think we need advance notice of the questions that everybody on the board is gonna ask, so we don't ask the same question.
Have a long list.
Have a long
Well,
list.
We actually
Check off.
Have a long list.
talked about that, and what we don't want is a canned list, because
Well, no,
well, no, but I mean, the questions could be totally different based upon their proposals in the evaluation.
And when you see their
I mean,
presentation.
let's just be very frank, CCMC would be totally different questions than you would ask of a totally blind player. Infomark who's one of our finalists, would be totally different questions if they came in with a hybrid proposal or something. So you've almost got to evaluate, I think we could talk about the order of questions, and maybe if somebody would feel more comfortable going first, and somebody else.
Or divide, or decide if we want to divide our time in 2 segments. Let me do 5 minutes and then I'll come back later with another 10.
I like 15 because.
No, 15
They're
total.
they're going
15
to
total.
answer these questions. You could find out, quite honestly, that you only get to ask 3 or 4 questions because.
Yeah.
If they do a little bit, if they're wise, they're gonna answer for 5 questions.
Well, it's up to you.
Some of us know how to ask.
No, but it's up to you. It's also up to you to cut them up. Thank you, I've heard enough on that. I have 3 more questions.
Yes.
Manage your
Because
time.
you will have to manage. the
You
board members will
manage
have
the
to
time
manage
that
their
you
15
have with them.
minutes. Okay. And I think, and it may be that, your question on your list gets asked by David, so.
I'll try not to.
Well, or Jackson or me, we may ask those questions. So I would have definitely a long enough list of things that are important to you. And that after you, and I think a lot of those questions will become clear once you see their proposals.
Right,
Once the
exactly.
RFPs hit your inbox, when you read how 700 pages, we think?
Each?
No.
I'm thinking you're gonna get 600-ish pages.
100-ish
total
each.
together.
Yeah, yeah. By the time you have 6 proposals, I think you're gonna have more than enough material to come up with 15 minutes of questions, but, and, we can certainly talk about that going forward, but.
But you should go to areas where you have a fundamental strength. I mean, there are people in this room who are interested in things that I could care less about. And that's just the reality. And I'm gonna go places you're not gonna go. So go to the place, because we need to understand software. We need to understand financials. We need to understand service culture. We got one
talk
chance
about
to get it
lifestyle,
right.
What they can bring to the table, what the bid is gonna be, what they're gonna do differently and what they think we're doing right. A lot of questions.
I also suspect, given the way the tours went, that it's an iterative learning process. In other words, I'll listen to Cindy ask questions the first night, and the second night I'll take them as my own. And claim great wisdom. But I think there is this process of learning and asking and developing and seeing lines of thought that develop in that process where we will get smarter as we go along. I pity the company that comes 6th, to be honest, because by then we will.
Remember, these are the interviews.
Right.
We're only doing 3.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Or 3, or 4.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Brian's it.
And and I think it's good that we haven't decided that yet, because we haven't seen their proposals. I mean, we could have 3 that are good and 3 that totally miss the mark, or all 6 of them would be great, and then we've got to really talk about it.
Can you help me understand a little bit more with the COA and CROA credit games?
Okay, so the CANOA meeting you're talking about the one where they talk with the RFP.
I'll
They've
change my
asked-
question a little bit.
During our last meeting with CJC and CANOA, it was brought to, that they asked specifically if they want to interview the companies one-on-one to focus on totally what they do for CANOA. And they want to make that clear that they understand what the proposal is to manage CANOA.
Do we have any concerns that the main signer of the contracts, who is Paige Pierce, who is president of CJC and CANOA, he gets the official say, the official veto,
Right.
and he is the developer?
I have.
Do we have any concerns about that in any capacity? Because I think the law might put the developer in a community that is no longer under developer control.
No, I believe that he understands our direction. We had a very productive and very enlightening meeting with him, and I feel like he is on board with this process and wants us to get the best management company for CROA.
From experience, I would recommend that we hold him tight to whatever he says and continue to remind him of what he says before he
Right.
changes last minute. From
I would-
experience.
yeah. I don't have concerns about that, but I will take that as I will heed your comment. Okay, any other questions about the timeline? I think it's a tight timeline, a lot going on.
But it is a tight timeline intentionally.
Yes.
We need to get through this process. It's going to be painful.
We have employees that we need to be fair to. This is a painful process for them. We need to get through this process so life can move on.
So just one clarification. On August 9th, it's a question about time of day.
That's gonna be,
Because I don't know if that's gonna be a long meeting or a short meeting. That's a question.
I would hope that is gonna be a August board meeting with one topic on the agenda.
That's right. It's August board meeting. It's executive, so it's still an executive session. Do we need to think about, do we start that at 4, 3, 5, 6, 7? That's a question.
I don't, and I
Imagine we'll know that on August 1st.
I don't know the answer to that. I would
Okay.
say at this point, I would say it's a regular 6 o'clock or maybe a 5 o'clock start time.
CCS first.
No, we have to have
CCS
CCS is second, because we have to make the
Endorse
decision. Yeah, we have to decide as CROA and then we.
Maybe just think of a
CCS
5 o'clock start time.
Yeah, and the CCS meeting is literally, it's
It's
a,
a ra- it's a ratify.
it's a basically a
It's a
second vote.
formalization.
Yeah,
And it's not recorded.
no, that is a executive session.
Our executive sessions have been earlier in the day.
They have been. Yeah, I think
We
the
can
week is.
figure it out when it gets
Okay.
closer. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow. Okay.
I'm looking at, what day of the week is that?
Monday.
Monday.
It's a Monday.
We need to pick a time that allows us to get all 7 people if humanly possible. And
Yes.
I don't mean this to be flip, but you fly. If you said you could only do it at 9 a.m. in the morning or 8 a.m. in the morning, then we need to be flexible because we really need 7 people. That would be a disaster to not have.
Because we gotta hash it out.
This is
No,
not one that I
this-
think we can do via Zoom.
Yeah, that's what he, that's
Well,
what
this
he,
is not a Zoom.
this is what Brian is saying. We would like everyone possible to be in the room on August 9th. Because that is the final decision. Okay, well, you're gonna zoom in then.
On August 9th.
saying, it's gonna be Zoom.
If you're gonna zoom in, then you're gonna.
Well, who do
you're-
you want to give your proxy to?
The question will
So it
be,
won't be Zoom.
well, if you're not gonna be here, you are gonna have to zoom in
Oh, I
because.
can do
of
that.
the requirement.
That's absolutely.
I would prefer, you know, and we've talked about it, we'd like everyone in the room, but if you're gonna be out, you're out.
This was
We're
like
gonna do it.
last minute,
It's fine.
daycare closed, grandma's got a babysitter.
Grandma's got a babysit baby, that's okay. I gotcha.
Priorities.
Priorities, exactly. Okay, any other questions?
Thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, just
The three of us.
two very different things. One is, when we have in the room, we're talking about the interview format, so we're doing the interviews and the chair of covenants, the chair of ARC, et cetera, would be back there. We'd have TV set up so they can be distant. They're not asking questions, but they can hear and see from back.
Yeah, and that's
I,
what we need,
when I say back there, I mean,
Yeah,
The
we
next
open the
room
doors
over.
and they're way
Yeah.
over there.
because this room is gonna be occupied by
By
CROA,
us.
CANOA, CDC, same thing, and the representatives from the company. We do need to define how many people they can bring.
That's a good question.
Because, I don't think 20 is appropriate. But we need to determine what the maximum number of people they can bring to this. We all know that the 45 minutes is gonna be a show. It's gonna be a presentation, so I'm sure it's gonna be
So-
audio, visual.
So part of their show may be, we should ask that of them, because part of their show may be, let us show you this quick clip. That makes sense?
I'm sure it will be.
It's gonna be, I would think we're going to have the screen available for them and the second TV, which we'll set up the kind of logistics of it, but the vision from what we talked about is to have a group of people on the other side with that wall down, so we can have both of these rooms for that
So
interview session.
with that, I think one of the things we haven't talked about is, so they're observing, is there an opportunity for them to give the board any feedback? Just from their observation?
People watching?
The people,
The committee
It's in
chair.
the next
that we
room,
invite-
yes, I
Next room.
understand.
so what sort of feedback? So that's,
After the meeting, you mean?
yeah, after the meeting, do they brief us? Do we get give an opportunity for written comments?
I'd be
That's
fine
just a que-
for like a 10 or 15 minute debrief. If they
That's
want
just,
to.
that's just a question.
If they just want to share feedback really quick.
Otherwise,
turn
what's the
into
purpose?
another.
Otherwise, what's the purpose of inviting them if they're
Yeah.
just there?
Yeah,
to witness
I
it?
just want to close that loop.
Yeah.
That's to that point. The other thing is, based on what we're talking about tonight, I'll update what I gave you last week, which was not electronic, but I'll send you a new version of this, which will be updated.
Yeah. So everyone can keep track of the dates.
To answer Cindy's question, what's the purpose of inviting them? To get community buy-in. These are people who invested a lot of time on this. They can at least see the process through. There are going to be people who are going to talk to somebody on one of those committees. Do you think this is a good decision, blah, blah, blah. So we're trying to get more community buy-in.
And I
So
found
let-
out that we're all gonna be lobbying very hard.
So let's talk about that. So finance committee has, how many people? 6? Seven.
Well, it'll be 6 non-Cindy members, so Cindy's the 7th.
Okay,
No,
so there's
Cindy
six,
members.
6 non-board members. Tech has how many?
Tech will have about
5. RFP has, I think we're down to
I think it's
4.
4.
4. And then we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chair people. So that's 15, so that's 20 people that are not a board member, in addition, watching the interviews and getting us feedback.
I think
They may
what
not all be here. I mean, that's a lot of people.
They're
And it
invited.
is
They're
only,
invited.
they're invited.
I understand, but I'm just saying.
And
it's a
are we,
practical matter.
that's the other question is, are we gonna allow them to say, if I'm a chairperson and I can't come, can I have my board member, this one come?
Sure.
So one,
If they're on the committee.
yes, so if the dog park chairman cannot come, they can afford someone else from the dog park.
They're designated.
Okay.
Do we have, anybody from Artisan Park on?
Oh,
They feel like,
Well, if we're inviting Artisan Park, then you've got every other service committee. I mean, that's the problem you run into, and Artisan Park's ran by every.
it's a service,
I know,
who is one?
it's a fair question, but
I would say no.
I'd say no.
I think it just opens up to every service area, and then what about condos? Do we bring in the condo people? I mean, at some level, I think we've got a committee structure, and I think we should stay with the committee structure. I don't-
It's a 7 standing committees.
And that, yeah, that's what we went with this, so that was the guiding principle, was 7 standing committees that we have representation from, and the 1 task force. Interesting question, though.
But I will also say, if you just look at the members of the finance committee and the RFP, you've got a fair number of artists.
Yeah,
on it.
there's some,
it
there's
covers some, but not
cross-pollination.
all, and that's,
Yeah.
I have,
Yeah, there's cross-pollination between the committees. All right, any other questions? We didn't know what I mean.
I don't even want to know.
A long day. All right, no questions? All right,
Sound good?
I-
Sound like a
everyone
good process?
comfortable with the process going forward? Okay.
Then mark those dates.
Mark those dates, yes, definitely mark those dates. Okay,
I expect June, July, and early August to be a Zoom.
it's gonna be a lot going on. Okay, all right, so we're done with that part, that last agenda item, board comments. Let me start off with board comments and then we'll open it up to others who also have board comments. One thing I want to, as leader of this board, I want to make a statement that when we are dealing with residents in a confidential manner, when we're doing committee appointments or we're talking about things that involve the resident and we're not identifying those residents, I think we need to be very cognizant about making sure that we don't have identifying stories, identifying comments. So we allow that confidential nature as we're doing appointments. I think a couple residents have raised that as a concern to me, and I want to make sure that we're all, that I raise that to you and make sure that we just hold that, so we make sure that, especially when we have residents who have applied to be part of our committees, who want to volunteer to help us, we want to make sure that as we have to deselect or select the members of the committee, that we hold that confidential so no one feels that they have been cited or called out in that situation. So I just ask that we follow that as we move forward, as we're dealing with appointments to committees. And David, I think David's hand was first, and then yours, Jackson, and then yours, Glover's next.
So one thing hearing a lot of the interviews that we've had, or the Q&A and the companies, and something that's been bubbling for about a year is, what can we do better with new residents, and particularly with Island Village coming on? How do we help them feel more part of the community? Jackson has done this with the alphabet soup course, lifelong. I've done it a few times. That's a half dozen people, maybe a dozen. But how do we get residents more engaged? So I started something with an outreach, since I'm the liaison of the foundation. I did have a sit-down conversation with Kathleen to start to think through what that might look like that's outside of lifelong. And so we had a very productive discussion. I have not written up my notes, so nobody has seen anything. But I just wanted to say that we're starting the discussion. We want to involve CDD. We want to keep it engaging, therefore short. Like our image is like 45 minutes. We would point to what we already have for our residents on the website with a 16, 20-page flip book. What can we do live, maybe monthly, so it's really crude, but it's starting to take shape, and then we'll come back with a concept and see what you all think. Then 3 quick reminders. One is we did decide a few weeks ago that the heart signs need to be down by the end of this month. I think June 1st is the date. There was also in last week's Friday Flash with that announcement, the announcement from the foundation to donate those to the Founders Park. I saw a dozen of those there already. And then a reminder that we have the flag ceremony this Saturday at 10 o'clock. Thank you very much. And then next Friday, week from this Friday, Aloha Friday Luau, with all of our fancy shirts and whatever else we do. And I think that was 6:30, Chair. Thank you.
So basically JR just wants to wear his parrot head shirt.
I don't know what we're gonna see. I don't know what we're gonna see and who's gonna have a hula, whatever you have on. A nice pleasant thought. Happy dreams.
Jackson.
Celia and I held the first condo council meeting of the year yesterday, right? Yes, only yesterday. And we had great turnout. I think we had maybe 9 or 10 of the condominiums out of the 13 represented. And we went through some information about changes in Florida legislation for 2021 as they affect condos. We talked about some initiatives that the board was undertaking. And then we listened to the residents for concerns that they had. And I just want to share with you very briefly, my takeaway was that security and making sure that their spaces are secure, whether it's the town center condos and the stairwells, or it's Carlisle and parking and Lakeside Park, that this is clearly the #1 issue, I think, that we heard really almost across the board from almost every condo yesterday, and that they have that concern that we are protecting the properties. I think the condominiums have more challenges because they've got more hallways and stairways and other things. So that was something I just wanted to bring to the board. The other issue that they raised is short-term rentals, and clearly they are feeling the brunt of that. I think Susanna did a great job of expressing to the leadership that was there that starts with residents telling us about other residents and giving us affidavits and letting us know what's going on. But it was a very productive meeting. We've already gotten some feedback today from people who were at the meeting that appreciated the fact that as condominium boards, they now have an opportunity to communicate with each other and with the CROA board. And I think that that's a real positive thing. So I wanted to share that.
It was a positive meeting. Very good.
So,
I like that that's going.
You said security, but you mean lack of security?
Yeah, lack of security. There's real concerns about Lakeside Park at nighttime and Heritage. We heard a lot of individual stories of people that are challenged by what they think is now sort of a post-pandemic. People are coming back out. We're seeing a lot more activity out on the streets, a lot of teenagers. And I don't think all the problem comes from teenagers, to be sure, but I think there is some concern about that. And so I think we just have to be pretty vigilant and aware.
Diana, we don't have to discuss it now. Jackson, Celia, can you guys email me their concerns with Lakeside? Because we just had that workshop last Friday talking about cameras at Lakeside.
Yeah, and we talked about that for sure, and we will. I'll type up some notes and send it to you.
That would be great, because that'll help us isolate any dark spots from cameras. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you got a comment?
I just wanted to, I know you emailed me back about the bricks at Lakeside, and that's my new obsession this month, because actually we were there Tuesday, and the guy that I was with tripped on the bricks after I told him not to walk over there. And is there any way we could like walking the sidewalks, that they're not safe. Is there any way they put something around there?
Suzanne, can you ask Tim to look at that and see if there's something we can do to make it more safe?
Yeah, just to make it
Okay.
safe. I
Like
understand.
horse and crime tape?
Yeah.
Maybe not the bricks are
It's
raising up
inside.
in the circle down by the tennis courts. The bricks are raising up, they need to be reset,
Okay.
and obviously they're
I don't know, I just,
Yeah.
No,
I got you. Yeah, but just have him see if it needs to be walked up, because I agree, it's.
It's better
we
to
have
deal with
people-
it now than wait for the Morgan lawsuit.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right. Kevin, you had a comment?
Yes, one other thing, two things real quick. One, thank you to management for the condo report adding town center. It has been the only association that was not included in that for a very long time. It's starting off where everything looks hunky-dory and perfect, but you know what, let's look at it like that. The second thing is I had a resident reach out to me about tennis courts over here at the K-8. The back end, I just want to make sure we get that back on our radar, something to do about it.
Which tennis courts?
The
Right here.
school tennis court.
Oh, school
Yeah,
tennis
the
courts.
county
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
school district. So I kind of gave a high level, understanding, and that was fine, but it's also let's make sure that it's still, something is still there. We do have CCS, we had that meeting earlier today. I would love to really see, something like the CCS dollars going into maybe fixing something for the county, for the school. Hey, can we go half with you, on different things, and use that funding from CCS because it actually does what it's supposed to. So it could be that, it could be cleaning up the exterior of the schools, it could be
We would have to
those
add,
types of things.
I agree, we want to run that past Tom Slayton and see if that's a valid use of our funds. I don't know that it is, but what's that, we can always ask. Right.
I thought we had asked that we wanted to see the contract related to the school.
I had asked that last
Yes.
Friday's workshop.
And
as
I
we
had-
started
I
our
had-
budget.
Because that
I had
might be a
followed-
good way to go after the tennis
I had
courts too,
followed up
send
with
to the board.
Susanna, and the only thing that we pay for is the maintenance of the fields. We don't pay for any specific maintenance on the tennis courts itself. So obviously, that's why
Let's see
they're,
what that budget line
Yeah.
item is.
so we've been emailing back and forth.
Good.
Yes, ma'am.
On that, years ago, the landscaper we had at the time volunteered to do some cleanup at the school with planting, clean up, some of the plants, and they planted new stuff, grass, just put that out there. I don't remember how much, they actually, but they, they did some noticeable work out there to make it look nicer and stuff, so, I don't know. We had that kind of relationship. But I would have thought, since we were talking about making the board book smaller, how would you guys feel about if committee, rather than holding all the committee meetings, minutes for the board book, if we gave the committees like 1 week after their meeting, and then Suzanne, you just email them to us 1 week after the meeting, so we're apprised of what they've been doing, but it doesn't end up, adding 50 more pages to the board book.
Well, I do know that the committees are much like the board in that they approve their minutes from the meeting before.
Well, yeah, but instead of putting them in our board book to look at,
Just after they approve them, just email them to you?
My one
It's true.
feedback on that is I keep in mind that the board book isn't just for us. The board book is actually for everybody else in the community.
well, there's no
so-
reason why you can't post them on the website.
But I guess my thought is it's not eliminating something, it's just putting it in a separate file. It's still, you know what I mean, it's
Well,
still,
wouldn't
it's
come,
more
it
about
wouldn't
the
come as
paper.
it wouldn't come as the official board book, but, and again, this brings up another point, is when we get OneDrive up and running, all those can be saved on OneDrive where we can access
for us,
them.
but for the residents, it's going on the website.
I feel like this is a great time to ask, so, board, you've realized, like, we send you a weekly thing on Friday now. When we're talking board packet, and then we're talking that information, it is redundant, so, again, I'm not asking you to make a decision today, I just think if we're talking board packet, I think, can we maybe tag along the weekly update we give, plus any other redundancy emails, because, the glorification of busy is not getting work done. So I will throw that one in. If it's valued, we want to keep doing it. If it's not, let us know.
I think it's definitely redundant, so I appreciate
it's
you
redundant.
mentioning that.
Or smarter, not harder.
Any other
So
comments?
what are we recommending then?
I don't know, does anybody, other than, there's no reason why we can't post that on the website.
Yeah, I
That's
don't-
our meeting.
I don't
I think
feel
they're
like
really
we need that. I don't feel like we need that weekly recap
something that CCMC has asked him to do, not us. We have not asked for it, so.
That's correct, but when we first started a few months ago, the board agreed, it's like, okay, let's see how it goes, and then we were gonna follow up with feedback for a couple months, and so if you can just piggyback on that with your board member.
I'm happy with the board package right now, I don't need to write it.
I don't need it.
Can we go back to the
The minutes, yeah.
I mean, because I would like to see the committee members posted on that. I would like to see all those committees.
On the town hall website.
Town hall
Yeah.
website. So you call the front porch.
I guess I could do it on my.
Yeah, I would like to see those committees posted there.
I
and with
personally
their
would,
minutes.
I personally would prefer one email that says, here's the minutes from this meeting, instead of getting it in the massive book when I.
Right, but I mean,
don't have
just
time to
with,
read through it,
with,
but that's my personal.
Kevin's question about that's the residents, I mean, I think we should have that up there, so if people are looking, oh, there's a dog park committee?
Yeah.
You know, and
And
when they
and they
meet,
should-
and
they're
their
posted.
minutes, and then we get them as.
People don't read through the board book as in public in great depth, and it's like they gather.
Well, I do,
around
it
to
takes
read
me,
it together.
24/7.
Love to radically downsize the board book, it's too thick
That's our
to be
workshop.
read.
That's
It's
a
it's
workshop.
no longer serving the purpose intended.
I think that could also be on the same agenda as the, let's look at the KPIs and see what,
Same idea.
if they're meaningful or not meaningful, because I think there's a lot of good meat in there, but we're missing it.
So,
Okay.
and this is definitely a workshop conversation, but throwing all this out there, I'd be curious from CCMC what their average board book size is compared to their average communities sizes.
You think there's a
Because
correlation between
really-
number of
I-
houses?
I see
I know
eyes
there's a
roll.
lot of pages, but I really don't think it's that much based on other associations I've been with. I really don't think so. I really do not think so, because we are more than just one association when you add up all the service areas. They are almost their own associations. Then you throw in all the committees and you throw in the lifestyles aspect. I'm
Well, that's
definitely,
impressive.
I don't think it's bad.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night.